Councillors, before we start the business today, I'm indebted to Councillor Forbes for advising me that this is the Perth Farmers Market's 20th anniversary. So I'm sure you'll all want to congratulate them and hope they continue for another 20 years. Can I welcome members of the public and press to today's meeting? And can I remind councillors and officers to use microphones and request that those attending the meeting ensure that all mobile phones and other communication devices are silent. Can I also remind those attending the meeting that it will be recorded and be available on YouTube via the Council's website following the meeting. I would advise that as expected we will have a break for lunch approximately at 12:30, but that's not indicative. Are there any apologies for today's meeting?
Provost, we have apologies from Councillor Harry Coates.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? I beg your pardon? Ian James. Thank you. Any others? No. Are there any declarations of interest in respect of items on today's agenda? Okay. Councillors, I can advise that a request for a deputation has been received from Scone and District Community Council to address the Council in relation to item 6 on the agenda. Can we agree to hear the deputation? Thank you. Can we agree to vary the order of business and consider item 6 on the agenda at this point rather than leave it till later on? Thank you, councillors. I'll now hand over to Deputy Provost Willie Wilson, who will be taking this paper.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, everyone. Before we proceed to hear the deputations on the CTLR paper, it's been drawn to my attention that there is an error in the transcription of the narrative within the technical assessment in relation to climate and summary table, which informed paragraph 3.7 of the Council report. The technical assessment summary at page 80 of the SWECO report states a preference for the northern route, but the table in paragraph 3.7 showed a preference for the CTLR route. A revised table is being issued, but given the importance of this paper and indeed the issue of climate, which is the subject of a motion before us today, it is important that councillors have the benefit of professional and technical and legal advice as regards any potential impact which this error may have on the recommendation before us today. I would therefore firstly ask colleagues from SWECO as to whether this error alters the technical advice which supports the recommendation, and now ask the representative of SWECO to make a statement.
Good morning.
We will circulate the revised table. Okay, just before you start, we'll circulate the revised table. Could we also give a copy to the representative from the Community Council and the press and media, please? Okay, thank you. Do you wish to proceed? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. My name is Rebecca McLean. I work for SWECO and I am an EIA Technical Director with them. As Councillor Wilson said, it is regrettably that there is a discrepancy in the SWECO technical report, and that was replicated in the Council report. It is section 3.312 of climate in the SWECO technical report, and the text in that section is correct. However, the summary table on pages 82 did not carry across that conclusion, and it shows CTLR instead of the northern route alignment. Although this mistake is regrettable, it does not change the overall conclusions and the recommendations in our technical report. Thank you.
Thank you. I now want to ask our Head of Legal and Governance to give us advice on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. The statutory duty to deliver best value is set out within the Council report. In determining best value, we need to take into account a number of different factors, including performance, quality, cost, efficiency and effectiveness, etc. You can see from the technical assessment that there are a number of factors where no route is preferred, and even where a preferred route has been identified, these are on the basis of slight differences, not significant enough in terms of benefit or detriment to make any material difference. If we were here today deciding this project anew, there would likely be no firm recommendation as to the route, as from a technical impact perspective we can see that there is much of a muchness and there is no discernible differences. The reality is, however, that we cannot go back in time and ignore the work done and the costs incurred to date, and in looking at our statutory duty to deliver best value, I need to assess that from where we are today. On that basis, I have had to look at the technical comparative assessment and to the risks which flow from a decision today to change the preferred route for this phase of the project. There is clear evidence that such a decision will cause significant delay, impacting upon other strategic initiatives and plans for the benefit of the wider community of Perth and Kinross, and incurring additional costs through abortive costs and the costs of new technical assessments, and significantly increase the cost of construction as a consequence of inflation costs resulting from the delay. Indeed, we have already increased these costs by delay to date in carrying out this comparative assessment. I therefore firmly stand by my legal advice regarding best value. I have taken the opportunity to discuss this with our external legal advisors, Brodie's, who concur with my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as this matter has been introduced at the beginning of the meeting, I want to make sure if there are any issues of clarification or questions on this specific matter that we deal with them now. So, but this is only on this specific matter. Are there any questions? Councillor Ling.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I was just wondering if you could explain how this error occurred.
Yes, so in terms of the climate change chapter, one of the things that is different between the current CTLR route and the northern alignment is that there is currently a green bridge proposed on the current route to join Highfield Plantation across where the current route would lie. As we were going through our engineering design, looking at the northern route, we were deciding whether a green bridge could or could not be included and whether there was any engineering constraints on that decision. That decision came probably later on in the day, and it meant that the table and the consistency of the table wasn't updated to reflect the renewed climate change chapter. So, in summary, the climate change chapter prefers the northern route because there is no green bridge and therefore there is more carbon associated with the green bridge. But the People and Communities chapter favours the current route because there is a green bridge. So you can see there isn't a kind of clear preference from either of them.
Councillor Ling, are you content with that response? Or a supplementary?
I'd just like to state that I find it quite worrying that we got to this stage in such an important project and the table was incorrect, and I don't know who pointed it out. Thanks.
I take your point, but we are where we are. Are there any other questions or points of clarification that anybody wants to raise on this particular issue? Just want to make sure they're dealt with now. Okay, are we content to move on? Thank you. We'll now proceed to deputations and invite Professor Jill Belch and Mr Donald McKerracher from Scoonan District Community Council to come forward and address the Council. If you come up to the lectern, please. I think you'll have been briefed beforehand that you have either 2 lots of 5 minutes or 1 lot of 10 minutes. Yes. We'll give you a warning after 9 minutes that you're running out of time, and after you have 3 and 7, that's
yes, 3
fine.
and 7 basically.
Okay,
is what we intend.
after that, then the members of the council may take the opportunity to ask you questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Please go on.
Right, I'm Donald McCarricker. I'm a community councillor in Scone Community Council. Following completion of the DMRB Stage 2, the line of the Cross-Tay Link Road was approved by Council during December 2016, based on drawings and the fly-through video, which, although noting the presence of H29 housing development, did not highlight the interface, as the video generally indicated green fields. At that time, the CTLR through the H29 housing site was shown to be in a fairly deep cutting, and we inquired at that time as to what proposals there were for acoustic and environmental screening. We were informed that this would be decided during the DMRB 3 phase. Following the appointment of SWACO as design consultants, we as a community council for approximately 90% of the Cross-Tay Link Road wrote to both PKC and SWACO requesting to be involved in the planning of the CTLR. It's disappointed to note that to date, we've not been contacted by either party. During this time, an in-principle application was submitted for the H29 housing development, and it was during the expansion of the proposals for both the CTLR and the H29 that it became obvious that the interface required some joined-up thinking. Following the public exhibition in May 2018, we wrote to both PKC and SWACO highlighting a number of concerns and requesting consideration be given to a realignment of the CTLR to the north of H29. Unfortunately, we have received no response to that from Perth Kinross Council. Following the request to the Chief Executive, we met with senior officers late in 2018 regarding other matters, and we also raised our concerns regarding the lack of consultation generally. These were noted, and as a result, in February 2019, we met with the head of planning, and at that stage it was agreed that our request for consideration of a northern realignment would be instigated. And the report today before you is a response to this investigation. The report generally indicates very little difference between the routes, except that there's been very little consideration given to concerns regarding noise and air pollution. The report appears more concerned with referring to recently proposed, when in fact these comparisons could have been carried out some 12 months earlier, had any cognizance been given to Scone Community Council. It appears that the report recommendation to take forward the current preferred route is based on financial, legal, reputational and consequential matters, in preference to any consideration to the health and well-being of the present and future residents of Scone. We're extremely concerned in respect of the approach adopted in preparing this report, and would ask you to reject this recommendation in order to avoid any deliberate damage to the health and well-being of our community. I'll now pass over to Jill for her comments.
Thank you. Over to you, Professor Bell.
A little small for this, actually. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving us the time today. My name is Jill Belsh, and I'm a community councillor for Scone District. I'm also a professor of medicine with an interest in pollution and health. I should like to begin by asking you to turn to the table that we have just been talking about, the one that is in the officer's summary report. May I ask you to consider that some of these scorings might be questionable? For example, the current route choice in terms of people and community is based on a potential bus route and takes no account of the fact that the community will be split by a major road, bringing with it pollution and road safety issues. We heard about the absence of a green bridge. If it's higher up, we don't need a green bridge. You've mentioned climate. That changes it again. And then you have non-motorized users. This favours the current route, and this is based on being nearer for NMUs. The difference in distance between the two routes at the widest point is 280 metres. That is from here to Debenhams, hardly enough to change the decision. Noise and vibration favouring the current route, because it has looked at only 5 households that will be marginally worse off. To quote the document, when the H29 development is constructed, these future dwellings will act as a barrier to road traffic noise to the closest existing dwellings. So it's actually saying the current route is best because the H29 houses will block the noise for these 5 houses. But what about the H29 houses? Not mentioned. Please look at page 63 of the SWACO report. This shows the noise that is going to be produced. Compare this to page 6, showing the two routes. It's unfortunate you don't see them together. But what you will see when they're superimposed, is that 1/3 of H29 will experience decibel levels above 56. That is above the WHO health recommendations, which are expected to become EU law in the next 4 years. And the 70+ houses and the school along its route will be unbearably affected. This box tick is in the wrong place. It is now 5 versus 8. It is repeatedly stated in the executive summary that there is no difference between the two routes in terms of air quality. A simple check of the table shows that the northern route is preferred. The officer's summary is simply wrong to state otherwise and to repeat it on a number of times. Despite the officer's many claims that the LDP must be adhered to, the Environment Act Local Air Quality Policy Guideline 2018 clearly states that air quality concerns can be a material consideration, and as such the LDP can be changed. Traffic of the quantity expected along the CTLR will produce pollution. 10,000 new houses will feed into it. It will attract lorries and other traffic from the north to Glasgow and Edinburgh. Upstream developments will use this road. How can it be considered right to take traffic causing such pollution in one part of the city and move it to North Scone? This damage from pollution occurs across a lifetime, from a baby's first week in the womb all the way through to older age. H29 babies will be at risk, higher levels of infant deaths, their mothers have high blood pressure. Air pollution next to schools is particularly damaging, even at low levels. Lung development in children will be reduced, hearts will be damaged, intelligence, behaviour will be affected. Older people are vulnerable to heart attacks, to strokes, lung cancer and dementia. Financial modelling by experts has shown how the health benefits of moving pollution away from homes can save millions in terms of social and health care. Pedestrian road safety in H29 is a major consideration and has hardly been mentioned. Surely you're going to ask for information on that. We understand that these serious health and accident considerations will be balanced against this cost, a potential 5 million cost which could have been avoided by earlier listening. But balance this against the NHS and social care costs this council will bear in the future. Further, if WHO limits the noise by law, you will be responsible for paying for noise mitigation measures, and if insufficient, you will be required Further, there may be litigation costs if this right to clean air comes in for those whose health has been damaged. Let's also look at Greenbelt issues. The Council approved using a section of the Greenbelt for H29, wasn't in the LDP. This benefited and made money for the developer. It should thus be easier to use the Greenbelt when there is a legally approved material consideration to change the LDP. And we believe the Council would not wish to have given Greenbelt to a developer and then not use it to help the people who actually live there. Today you are being asked to vote on a highly significant project with enormous potential health ramifications without the most important accompanying report, the Environmental Impact Assessment. Can you responsibly approve a major road route without it? This is an odd thing to be asked to do. Who benefits from this current route? The road users will use the road no matter where it is. Both routes will alleviate pollution and congestion in the city centre. It's not too late. The LDP can be changed, the Greenbelt used. Further, in terms of best value, a cost-effectiveness document can be prepared showing savings from health and social care, from improved road safety, from future noise and pollution attenuation costs, which will offset the delay costs. And this will remove any concern over best value, and it will also protect your reputation. I would say to you, don't approve this current route, designed to bring ill health and death to H29. It is not a political issue. It is a people you represent issue. Please vote for the route best supported by facts and with consideration for the lives you will save. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if you just tarry a while, questions to the deputation, please. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Thank you for the deputation, and thank you for speaking so compellingly in favour of your preferred option, obviously. One question, if the council were to opt for the more northerly route today, would you still be in opposition to the construction of the road, or is this the one remaining concern that you have about the road? Thank you.
We have no objection. We're looking forward to the road because we don't want the houses built without it. This road is a very positive move. I do think it is important for the council to speak with NHS Tayside's public health representative, and I would ask that the council ask the council officers if they have any views from Dr. Jackie Hyland.
Councillor Barnacle, and then Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I wanted to ask, if you look at the timeline of events in Appendix 1, it talks about the January to April 2012 proposed LDP published for consultation, showing the route and the interface with the site. And then there were 14 consultation events, including one in Scone. And then in 2015, we had the main issues report indicating the preferred route and the housing development site. It says here, no representations received in relation to that. I would ask the Community Council why not. And then later on, we had proposed plan LDP2 in December 17, showing the route with a 9-week public consultation. And then in September 18, there were no unresolved representations regarding the route. Again, I would ask the CC why not. I'm sympathetic to your arguments, but why wasn't this addressed earlier?
Okay, if I could perhaps address the points you're raising. As far as the County Council was concerned, a primary part of our concerns at that time was a large development of houses. And also at that time, the objection we had was not to the line of the Cross Tay Link Road, but was the fact that the Cross Tay Link was making a ghetto basically on the north side of this, a small portion which is going to be perhaps 100 houses, say as part of this H29. Now we raised that at the time. We did not object to you're quite correct, we did not object to the line of the Cross Tay Link Road at that stage. It's only as things have developed, it became obvious that the developer's proposal is to put that as an urban street. He has presented drawings to this council which show he wants it as a street lined with affordable housing. Now, why would you have affordable housing except you know there's potentially going to be a problem, and if they're trying to get people in affordable houses to utilise these rather than the commercial market who may be more in a position to object to them. So that's, as I say, it's only, you're quite correct, at the time perhaps it was not raised as a complete objection, but it was just the fact, as I say, it's only because as time has developed, as both projects have developed, it's become obvious that there's a total conflict of interest in that area where the two intersect.
Mr McGregor, I need to advise you strongly that words like ghetto are not acceptable in the council chamber. You might wish to withdraw that. I see some raised eyebrows.
Sorry, I would withdraw that.
Didn't want to interrupt your flow, but that's fine if you withdraw
an isolated little community of 100 houses. Is that better? I would withdraw that. That's not a problem. Sorry.
A lot better.
Yes.
Okay. Now I've got.
May I just add to that?
Yes, of course.
Because one of the issues is that the council itself was presented with the route of the CTLR without seeing H29 in position. And in speaking to a number of the councillors, it has been obvious that they did not appreciate this either. And in 2017, we wrote to SWECO in January, and we wrote to council officers in the spring, asking to be involved in the consultation for the CTLR. Unknown to us, statutory consultees were consulted in the August of 2017, and we still didn't hear anything, and we wrote again in 2018. And at that time, we didn't actually understand the full implications of the route. And I would say again that we have been asking for some years to be involved. And in fact, I've just recently put in a participation request to see if we can work together on this.
Thank you. Councillor Barnacle, have you a supplementary? No, okay. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Unless I misheard you, I think you said there was 10,000 new homes feeding into this road. Can you explain where they come from?
If you look at your own business plan for the CTLR, it is based on 10,000 homes being built and feeding into it. I can provide that. We got it under freedom of information.
Councillor Forbes, do you want to follow that up?
No, but I have a second question, although I think it's probably more relevant for officers than at this stage. I'll keep it for later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just two linked questions, if I may. The first was you were talking about the pollution at Bridgend and lifting the traffic out onto the CTLR. I would put it to you that all that traffic will move onto CTLR. It will still be traffic coming to Bridgend. So to say that's all going to be lifted out, I would think would be wrong. And my second point is, you talked a lot about air pollution and noise pollution. This is going to take, I believe, 5 years to construct, and the housing may come up another 4 or 5 years after that. Would you accept that the powertrain of motor cars in that time will have changed to electric or even possibly hydrogen hybrid? 10 years is a long time. I appreciate there will still be petrol and diesel cars on the road, but that will make a significant difference to noise and air pollution in both areas.
Yeah. No, I think we all wish for electric vehicles to be more frequent. The big problem is, and you've probably seen the government's own paper on it, it looks as if it's going to be very challenging to move that above 10 to 12% of the population within the next 15 years. The reason being that people who live in flats and who live in isolated areas can't get the charge pods. And furthermore, it does take, as you know, unless you have a Tesla supercharger, over an hour to charge. And so therefore you are condemning a generation of children to this pollution. Secondly, as you know, electric vehicles do not make as much noise. Yes, that is true, but they still make contact with tarmac. But one of the big dangers with electric cars is you don't hear them, and you're going to have children playing on these roads. Let's keep all traffic away from people if we can, particularly if you're joining a trunk road to a trunk road. It shouldn't go through a development. Thank you.
Councillor, do you have a supplementary?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Councillor Lyle.
Thank you. No, my asked question was really in reference to the inappropriate language used by Mr. McKennicker.
Thank you. We've dealt with that. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. My question is for Professor Belch, as probably the most senior medical expert in the room. Could you give us an indication of the lifetime costs related to treating a person with pollution-related illnesses? I appreciate this is a difficult question to answer.
Our own government estimates that between now and 2025, the cost to the UK will be between £8 and £13.5 billion.
Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Professor Belch, I just wonder, some of the health impacts that you were outlining in your presentation, there are some conditions which are directly related. There are some which are long-term conditions, developmental conditions in children, but there are some conditions and hospitalisations which can occur on days when there is high pollution levels. I wonder if you could give an indication of what the difference in hospitalisation levels on low pollution versus high pollution days is. And also, I'll let you answer that, and then I've got a follow-up question.
As I mentioned, I have an interest in air pollution, and I didn't feel appropriate to bring up my own work, but what I have done is I have looked at the hospital admissions in Perth and Dundee and measured the daily pollution levels, taking into account temperature, humidity, holidays, etc. And what we find is that if you take all admissions together, they, between the different quartiles of pollution, in low pollution, you find that you double the admissions when the pollution goes up. So essentially, for all admissions in Tayside, you get double the number when the pollution is high. This is accounted for partly by heart disease, partly by respiratory disease, but to a certain extent also by increased childhood admissions, probably with asthma, but I haven't looked at that yet.
Councillor, do you want to ask any more?
Yeah, thank you. And in terms of even the days when there are low pollution levels, obviously there are statutory limits on air quality for emissions of particulates, NOx, various of the oxides of nitrogen, for example, various different sizes of the particulate parts per million. But even on the low pollution days when air quality might not breach any of the statutory limits, people don't suddenly start suffering ill effects when a statutory limit is breached. There is a gradient and there are effects below statutory limits, and those statutory limits are only likely to decrease in future rather than increase. Is that your understanding from looking at this?
Yes, we're very lucky in Scotland because we have really very advanced anti-pollution laws. And as you probably, in fact, you know better than me, the current document is going through and it will lower the levels even more. One of the big worries, and there's a lot of scientific evidence behind it, is school children, and they are affected even at very low levels of pollution. And I believe the Scottish Government is minded, again, you will know more than me, I believe the Scottish Government is minded to lower the levels round about a school even further than the current statutory levels, which WHO is also trying to persuade us to lower.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sarwar.
Mike, there we go. Thank you for your deputation, for taking the time to come here today and for the work that you've put in. My first question is, in your role as community councillors, can you tell us about the way that you've engaged with the community and the feeling about this decision that we have in front of us today?
Thank you for the opportunity. Clearly there are a small number of people who reside close to the proposed route, and understandably they do not want it. However, as a community council, we are bound by the regulations to represent the opinions of the majority. As a community council, we are quite proud that we actually do go out with questionnaires, and we actually polled 10% of the population. And it was a genuine poll. It wasn't, here, we don't like this road, sign here. It was, here are the two routes, what do you think? So this was a genuine poll, and 100%, excluding the two council members, council officers who did not want to comment, said that they were pretty horrified that the road would be going through a building. They also were horrified because they felt that moving it further up would give them safer access to Highfield Road. So it wasn't all just concern about the pollution and noise. But we have engaged with them. We've had many letters. We have had Facebook comments. We have had it on Twitter. And of course, we have our regular monthly meetings where we've taken cognizance of the villagers' opinions.
And my second question is, you alluded to the council's consultee on public health. I just wondered if you were able to offer any more detail on that.
It's my understanding that there is an agreement between the NHS and the council that NHS Public Health be consulted on issues such as this. And I just wondered if Dr. Jackie Hyland had any comment that she had provided to the council officers about this road. Dr. Hyland, as some of you may know, is an expert on noise and air pollution, and I would just have been interested to hear her views.
We've got Councillor Duff next, and then Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Thank you very much for your answers to Councillor Stewart on air pollution. We have heard from the companies involved that there will not be any exceedances of the current air quality regulations caused by the existing route of the CTLR, and I just wondered, despite what you say about low pollution elements, if you accept that there will be, that the levels of pollution will be well within the existing regulations.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. If you look at the comments about the CTLR causing the pollution, it talks about the road itself, and that's quite correct. That's what SWECO was asked to do, assess the road. It was not asked to assess the road in the context of having houses along it. And as I'm sure you know, the problem with pollution, particularly in Bridgend, is that you have the buildings. If you don't have buildings, you have wind, which takes away the pollution. And if you do have buildings, it acts like what is termed officially as a funnel, and the pollution then builds up. So the SWECO report quite correctly has dealt with the road, but it has not dealt with the fact that there will be, and you can see there, double-storey houses alongside. And also, I guess you'll know too that absolutely it is fact that when you build a new road, people use it, and you always get more people along than you think.
Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Thank you very much indeed for your answers today. It's just so that I can get a little bit of understanding. You've mentioned some interesting points on health and pollution and the connection between the two. So would it be right in thinking that if we wanted to benefit health, we should reduce pollution for our residents as a matter of urgency? Would you be in agreement with that?
I would be in agreement with that, but I wouldn't want to rapidly go ahead for the sake of 12 months delay and condemn a generation of people, because once that road's built, it's there forever.
Councillor Lyle.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just a comment that should this council decide to go ahead today and build the road, I certainly hope people will use it. That's the whole intention of building a road. I have to say, and it's a sort of doomsday scenario that you portray, Professor Belch, around this. There are other roads in Scotland, there are other schools in Scotland, and there are other houses in Scotland, and everything has to be taken into proportion. We have information before us today that this proposed route will still leave the route and the people surrounding it with air quality issues significantly below those required by the Scottish Government. Significantly below, not marginal, not above, but significantly below. And I suggest that some of the information that you've given us this morning is a rather doomsday scenario portrayal of reality. And I just wondered if you would like to respond to that.
I think that I presented the facts as I see them. As indicated, I think it would be nice to hear NHS Tayside's opinion. I do not believe the report because the report has taken into account that there will be houses built along when it has talked about the air pollution. It has not taken into effect this corridor effect. We're going to have 10,000 people driving up and down, we hope, because we don't want them in the city centre. We're going to have more developments upstream, and we're going to have similar traffic flows that go through Bridgend. And to me, it seems very likely that we will therefore have similar levels of pollution because the traffic will in fact be greater. We'll have a quicker route from the north for lorries going to Edinburgh and Glasgow. It is a matter of opinion, and you take it or leave it, I guess.
Can I supplementary?
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just, you suggest there that we're going to create an identical, a replica of the situation at Bridgend. Bridgend is a canyon with high-sided buildings at either side. The buildings along this route will have to go through a planning process, which will take cognizance of things like the canyon effect for air pollution, etc. And I'm sure, given the planning regulations and the improvements to planning regulations that you allude to, we will have to set these houses back, and there will have to be appropriate spacing between them to mitigate that very issue.
If you look at where the pollution monitors are sited, yes, some of them are in the canyon, but some of them are not. Some of them actually have tree-lined gardens beside them, and it is the walls that is producing the canyon effect. I refer you to the Perth Kinross Council diagrams showing where the monitors are.
Thank you. Now we've got Councillor Reid next and then Councillor Ling, and after that I propose to draw the questions to a conclusion unless I see an arm shooting up to follow on. Okay, Councillor Reid, on you go.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Can I just clarify, is your major objection to the road or to the H29 development?
It's to neither. It's to the route of the road. We want the road. The H29 has planning permission. We want the people of H29 to be healthy. We want the road and the appropriate route.
But your problem is with the road going through H29?
Yes.
Councillor Ling.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. That was actually going to be one of my questions. I just wanted it reiterated that there was no objection to the houses per se. There's no objection to the Crossday road link per se. It is purely the route running through there. Would you agree with me that we're arguing over here about levels of air quality? We should be seeking the best air quality we can get, not some arbitrary level that should be beneath or above. I was wondering if that's your take on it.
Yes, I can only agree, and I think the Scottish Government will probably follow suit, and we will find much lower regulatory levels. But as you say, any pollution is bad.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up. Can I thank you both very much for your deputation and for answering the questions. You may resume your seats now. Thank you. We'll now proceed with the business and invite Jim Valentine, Deputy Chief Executive, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Thank you, Councillors. Councillors, the paper before you sets out a technical appraisal of two possible routes for the eastern end of the Crossday Link Road. Firstly, the current developed line, which has been through a full statutory process to date, and a more northerly route, which has been put forward following concerns around the proposed route and its proximity to the future housing site. Many of you have already heard the detailed arguments around the two routes, which were put forward in the briefing session on Monday, and I fully appreciate the passion behind the reasons put forward for choosing one line over another. As a member of the Cleaner Air for Scotland Strategy Review Group, I have seen the evidence of emissions reducing across Scotland, although not nearly quickly enough. And action needs to be taken to ensure that our targets are met and citizens protected. However, this action needs to concentrate on the areas with the highest level of emissions, where people are already in danger. We must be careful about catastrophising around a future scenario based on development which does not yet exist, and a transport network which has already been set ambitious targets to work towards a zero carbon future. The houses adjacent to the Crossday Link Road will not be constructed for many years. But in the meantime, there is a real and current problem with air quality standards across Perth city centre, which is impacting upon people every day. Our modelling shows that the current standards for air quality will never be exceeded in the Scone area, even after the full build-out. But already areas like Bridgend, Athol Street and South Street are showing exceedances to standards. The Crossday Link Road provides a solution to take traffic and congestion away from the pinch points in the city centre, allowing us to reshape our road network and improve air quality. This argument has been well rehearsed over a large number of years. The technical comparative assessment shows that there is no benefit in choosing the northern route. There have been arguments put forward over the local issues adjacent to the site concerning air quality and road safety, but there is no evidence that either route would compromise the standards which the Council are required to maintain in these areas. The reality is that the progression of the northern route would not only result in a significant financial cost of £7.1 million, it would also lead to a minimum of a 17-month delay in the scheme progressing. This would mean continuing exposure to air quality issues for the residents and visitors in Perth city centres. The Crossday Link Road is critical to the growth of our economy, the connectivity of the area and its ability to divert traffic away from the city centre. While they might not be palatable, all the facts are as set out in the report before you, and our recommendation is that Council sticks with progressing the current route. I would just like to pick up on a couple of points that were made earlier as regards a consultation with Jackie Island. I met with Jackie's boss. I corresponded with him back in December 2016, Dr. Drew Walker, and met with him in January 2017 regarding the Crosstay Link Road. He never raised any issues with regard to site H29 or its layout. And I would also like Peter Marshall, if he could just pick up on the consultation matters that were mentioned and the extent of the consultation that's been carried out. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Marshall, do you want to make that point now? It might save time with questions later on.
Certainly, Deputy Provost. There's been a long history of consultation on the Crosstay Link Road. I won't go into all of the stages because between 1995 and 2010 we were consulting on the principle of the route rather than getting into any of the details. However, in 2010 we published the main issues report for our first local development plan. That contained the principle of the Crosstay Link Road and the principle of the Scone North development. In 2012, I should have said at that point, it didn't have a precise route. By the time we got to 2012, our proposed local development plan put forward the Scone North site and a corridor for the Crosstay Link Road, which went through the site H29. There was extensive consultation on that, and in February 2012 we had one of our consultation events in Scone itself. A total of 271 people attended that consultation, and there was considerable discussion on both Scone North and the Crosstay Link Road at that stage. In 2014 we adopted that local development plan, having been through examination by the Scottish ministers. During that process, there was no objections relating to the issue in discussion today. In other words, that the Crosstay Link Road had the potential to go through part of the Scone North site, H29. In 2012, we published the main issues report for LDP2. It clearly indicated that we have a Scone North site and a Crosstay Link Road. We then progressed in 2017 to publishing the proposed plan for LDP2, again indicating that the Crosstay Link Road corridor went through, a route rather this time, went through the Scone North development. In none of these consultations did Scone District Community Council indicate any objection to the issue under consideration today. In other words, the route going through the Crosstay, going through the Scone North site. In addition to that, we have consulted on the Perth Transport Futures project, and that was involved in selecting the preferred corridor for the Crosstay Link Road. And again, there were no objections to the chosen route in respect of this issue. There have also been consultations in relation to the design of the route for the Crosstay Link Road at the detailed design phase. And if I could perhaps pass to Gillian Ferguson to respond to that.
Just picking up on the points that Jim Valentine has made and the Community Council in their presentation. Scone District Community Council have been in contact with myself or either my senior officers or SWECO over 21 times since March 2017. The first questions were really in relation to the stages of the Perth Transport Future project, seeking clarification. And I'm just going to pull out a couple of things. They then wrote to us again in April 17, just concerning about awarding the contract as a single contract. We also
we had the public consultation events in May 2018. That is when we told them of the events and also advised of the need to meet with them separately if those dates didn't suit. We held the public consultation. They then followed that up on just afterwards with comments on it. We did respond to that as well, and what we would want to point out is that most of the concerns they raised at the time were addressed, with the exception of moving the route in full. Back in July 2018, again, I reminded them of our offer to meet, which was never taken up.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to questions on the report to officers, and that includes representatives from SWECO. Councillor Ling, I've got you first.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Everyone can agree that we've got pollution problems, air quality problems in Athol Street and at a bridge end. And these have occurred because of bad planning, if you want to call that, from years and years ago, or planning with not knowing what was coming and the amount of traffic. That's how we've arrived at this problem. We know now of traffic pollution, and it looks as though we could be moving forward with something that is foreseeable to be a problem in pollution, and we're choosing to do that. Whereas the bridge end and Athol Street.
Is there a question emerging?
Yeah,
from
the
this
question is: would the officers not agree that the real crux of the matter and the time delay is the extra spend, and that's what we're down here. And councillors will have to make up their own minds whether the extra spend is worth to alleviate a foreseeable problem in pollution moving forward.
Okay, Mr. Valentine, do you want to take a first stab at that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. No, there are two issues. There's the extra spend and the best value aspect of it, but there is the increase in exposure to the air quality issues that there are in the city centre.
Supplementary, please.
Yes, on you go.
But these issues will be addressed no matter which route we go ahead with. The city centre air quality issues. It may be slightly later, but it will be taken care of.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Lane, but that exposure will continue until such time as the Cross-Tay Link Road is in place.
Okay, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. So two questions, if I may, both are fairly short. The first one is, so this phase of works already involves the construction of more road miles than any of the other two phases combined, and I'm talking about from the A9 right through to the A94. Therefore, my question is, which of the risks and costs outlined in this report would be removed if we were to create two phases? The first to start according to the current timeline and take the road from the A9 to the A9. The second to deal with the rework aspects of a more northerly route between the A93 and the 94.
I'll ask our SWECO representatives to answer that, please.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Chris Carner from SWECO. So I'm not sure I really understand your question relating to splitting the contract. Do you mean in terms of undertaking two separate procurements?
Apologies, not splitting the contract necessarily. It's more a higher level question of if we were to, so the report outlines various risks and delays and additional cost of reworking this end of the road. However, if we were to continue with the current timeframes regarding the part of the road that goes as far as the A93, have a temporary terminus there and then build this last part on its own time frame, how many of those risks and additional costs are mitigated by acting in that way?
It's probably better if I answer that question. It's quite a big answer. I'll try and keep it brief. Can obviously what would happen if we did split it effectively, depending on the timings would dictate whether we had to issue that as a new contract or whether it could be done as a variance to an existing contract is one issue. However, we would have to effectively, there's the CPO process, the compulsory land process, there's the planning application process, which would very much we would have to do too. So in terms of any mitigation with regard to time, we don't think that would be achievable. Cost, again, it's quite a detailed answer, is that, for example, the best way I can do it, if we had 2 contracts, because effectively that's what would happen, we would have 2 sets of preliminaries which is required for each site. For example, the A985 scheme, the preliminaries per week on that job were £60,000. So we would effectively have 2 sets of those. I'm not saying they would be that scale, but in summary they would be larger. There's also a fact that if we issued a contract up to the A93, we've actually had to look at the contracts, or like the phasing of the works on site. You're looking at the west of the River Tay is kind of one thing, and then the bridge over that, and then the A93 up to the A94 would be effectively the next section, if you like, in terms of how the contractor would do it. However, there's quite a large piece of cut material on the east side near the A94 because of levels. So that cut is actually being used to fill next to the River Tay on the west side of that. So that in itself, as you'll know, you would never want to take any material off site, and equally you don't want to bring any in either, just because of the costs involved in that. And again, even how the mechanics of that would work, the logistics on site would be very difficult. These are just some of the practical things that are kind of, I'm probably not answering it really that well, but there are so many implications of doing that. That doesn't even take into account that if we ended up with a road to the A93, the impact that would actually have on the A93 itself in terms of traffic, that would be another, we'd have to go and look at the modelling of that. In effect, Bridgend would be considerably worse than it is just now if we did that. I'm not sure if that's answered
Councillor Bailey, does that begin to answer your other technical question? Okay, I think there's a lot of detail in that response. Okay, yeah, sure.
Second question, if I may. It relates to the transport model. So I'm looking at, within the SWECO assessment, I'm looking at page 84 at the map of the proposal for the CTLR that was modelled in Paramix, which I'm assuming is computer software that tells us about traffic flows. In that map, and people will know I am somewhat of a cartography geek, it shows the northerly route, the red line, and it has 2 variations, I believe, compared to what the proposal is in the rest of the papers. The most notable one is that the access to the Scone North housing development is missed, and also that the roundabout junction with the A93 is actually moved north, whereas it won't be in reality according to the rest of the papers that we have. So my question is, do officers feel this will have had a significant impact on the traffic modelling, which comes out with a preference to the alternative, which comes out with a preference to the current route in the table at 3.7? So in summary, my question is, will this variance in the map, between the map that was used for the traffic modelling compared to the map that is in the report, have had a material impact on the outcome of that traffic modelling? Thank you.
Would like to tackle that one.
Alex Deans will answer that question, Deputy Provost.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very good question, Councillor. I think it's more diagrammatic, the line you're actually looking at, an actual detailed traffic model. There are connections to the H29 site. I haven't got that in front of me. In terms of the overall modelling between both of the alignments, it's pretty much of a muchness in terms of the strategic traffic. There's not much difference. It's not really affected by that change. In terms of one of the previous questions toward Gillian, in terms of splitting the route, we've never actually looked at that in modelling terms, but I think, and Gillian sort of alluded to it, you wouldn't get the full benefits at Bridgend, because a lot of the traffic that's gone through the city centre has actually gone up the 94. So again, you would lose some of that benefit, so Bridgend wouldn't get the full relief of the full scheme. Is that? Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Before I come to Councillor Forbes, I'm aware there's a degree of slight chatter in the room sometimes. That's applying on both sides of the room. I think we would all, out of courtesy to the officers and everybody else, make sure that we concentrate on the questions and the answers to them. I think that would be appreciated. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. you'll be pleased to know I'm not a cartography geek, and therefore my question will be a little bit more simple than my good friend and colleague, Councillor Bailey's. Relating to a suggestion that was made that SFECO didn't take fully into account the houses around the road when they were doing their pollution modelling. I wonder if anyone from SFECO, if that's the correct pronunciation, or our officer could respond to that, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll pick up on that one. With our air quality modelling, there's been a full detailed air quality model carried out by Ricardo. And if you know Ricardo, they do all of the modelling for Perth and Kinross as well. And they use a modelling system called Rapid Air. What we've looked at is roadside levels across the road, but also we'll be looking at levels as you go back from the road into the housing scheme. So that will give you concentrations at 10 metres back, 20 metres back, 30 metres back. And you'll be able to see the progression as the concentrations decrease. I think it's also important to note that North Scone development is at master plan stage just now, and there is a school and there are houses shown, but these are not fixed. And you would expect for those detailed applications that further air quality assessments will be done, but we have considered them in full within our own EIA as well.
Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I have two questions. The Community Council mentioned the lack of an environmental impact assessment, but we do have an environmental assessment as a sub-criteria of the technical comparative assessment. So one question would be, is it a statutory requirement to do a full environmental impact assessment as opposed to what's been done? And the second point, paragraph 2.6 outlines the many years of assessment and scrutiny to come to the proposal, and I note what was said about the lack of objection in the earlier stages to the preferred route. But surely, if you're planning something on such a large scale, I know the Cross Tay route is not a trunk road, it will carry a lot of HGVs, I would assume. And why would you plan to put such a road through the middle of a development? Surely that is not good planning, and we have an opportunity here to revisit that at this late stage, perhaps. For example, the A977 that goes through my ward is not a trunk road, but it carries the largest number of HGVs in Perth and Kinross. And if you were planning it now, you wouldn't take it through villages. So I'm just asking that point about the planning aspect.
If I can just pick up on your point with regards to EIA. So under the EIA Regulations 2017, if you're planning or proposing a development, there are a list of criteria within Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 of the EIA regs about when you would need to do an EIA. And that is to do with if you were coming forward with a planning application. So for the CTLR route, when it goes to planning application stage, it must be accompanied by an environmental impact assessment report, which is what is being prepared.
If I can further add to that, the various stages of the local development plan and the development of Perth Transport Futures project by statute also required to have a strategic environmental assessment, which is the type of environmental assessment or the term for an environmental assessment at the plan making stage rather than the detailed design stage. So it has been through environmental assessment at various stages already in the process. Turning to your question about whether you design new communities with roads going through them, one of the aims when developing Perth Transport Futures and having set on the idea of a Cross-Tay link road to the north of Perth was then to create the expansion areas of Perth within that area where the new road would give the capacity for the developments to be serviced. And I think that's where we got the reference earlier to 10,000 houses being served by the new road, which is not all 10,000 are directly connected to the road. It's the fact that by freeing up that traffic capacity by creating the Cross Tay Link Road, we give the capacity to see the planned expansion of Perth. However, we also looked at trying to connect in some of these new expansion areas to this strategic roads infrastructure. And you're probably aware that the Cross Tay Link Road also goes through the Bertha Park development. It connects very closely with Almond Valley Village. There have been preliminary ideas in looking at the potential for connecting the Lunkerty South development into it as well. So it improves the connectivity of these developments as well. I take on board what you said about the 977 and Crook of Devon. What you see, I think was referred to by one of your colleagues earlier, was design of roads which did not anticipate the growth in traffic that we've seen in the last 50 years or more. What we are talking about here is a road that is designed for traffic volumes which we are predicting in the future, not just traffic volumes that are there at the moment. So we are taking that forward planning view in looking at it, and built into that are design features such as crossing points to ensure that it is as safe as possible. So I don't think it's right to compare the retrofitting of traffic into the old city centres and village centres compared with what we are doing in terms of designing the Cross Tay Link Road within Bertha Park or in Scone North.
Councillor Barnacle, does that answer your points? Okay, thank you. Now we've got Councillor Stewart and Councillor Purvis to come. Are there any other questions? Councillor McDade, and are there any other? And Councillor Sarwar. Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I just wanted to ask two questions, but I'll ask them separately. So the first one was to follow up on what the Deputy Chief Executive had said in reply at the end of his remarks. The Deputy Chief Executive said that he'd spoken to the Director of Public Health at NHS Tayside in January 16 and in December 16 and January 17, Dr. Walker had not raised any objections to H29 on the CTLR. But if I went to the Scone North planning application page on the PKC website and looked down to the comments on the 9th of January 2017, I would indeed find a letter of objection from Dr. Drew Walker. The question specifically, though, had been about the Council's engagement with Jackie Hyland, consultant in public health and health protection, as the designated person for the CTLR. I understand that she attempted to get in touch a number of times yesterday with officers to confirm that she had not been shown the CTLR, a map overlaying the CTLR and showing it going through the Scone North housing development. Is that the case?
Okay, take these points first. I think one is the issue about the information from Dr. Drew Walker. Can we comment on that?
Sorry, I have the email from Dr. Walker in front of me. I met with Dr. Walker. I know that he shared an email with Scone District Community Council. He sent an email to Scone District Community Council. After we met, he subsequently agreed that he would withdraw that. Now, it may still be on the system, but he had agreed he would withdraw that. Throughout this process, NHS Tayside have been consulted through Dr. Walker at this various CPP meetings, where he's seen presentations on the CTLR and on the LDP, and through Bill Nicholl. Jackie Hyland was in contact with officers yesterday. She received a response from me last night, and she received various pieces of correspondence back and forward during the day. The plans were known, the plans have been published, and NHS have been consulted as a statutory consultee. The fact that Jackie Hyland hadn't seen, I can't say if she saw the plan that was overlaid by the CTLR or not, but it was certainly sent to NHS Tayside.
Okay, supplementary?
Well,
no, is this the next question, right? Okay.
I was just going to remark that I was actually at a public health development session that Jackie was also present at last week, and at that point on, I think it was Tuesday of last week, she hadn't had contact from Sweco.
Pretty obviously she has now. On you go.
So the second question was about the air quality mitigation measures and the prospect of the local low emission zone in the centre of Perth. I'm aware that the administration in a meeting 12 months ago today put £100,000 into the capital budget for air quality mitigation measures, but in the last 12 months could officers confirm that no concrete proposals have come forward for spending that on physical air quality mitigation measures, and that it is currently proposed just to include that in amongst other budgets. So there have been no specific proposals or outline business cases developed or brought forward for spending money now to mitigate air quality measures in Bridgend, Athol Street, the city centre, etc.
Okay, it's maybe not core to the discussion, but Bridgend has been mentioned. So,
yep. Given that it's in the report, Deputy Provost, it's very core.
Yes, indeed. I'm saying. Yep.
I can talk in the first point in terms of the budget, and then I'll ask Kirsty Stephen, sort of to answer in more detail. The funding was available for this current financial year.
The Chief Executive wants to respond, Councillor, to your point about Dr Hyland and contact.
Councillor Stewart, just to clarify that Jackie Hyland, her first email to the Chief Executive Office was on the 18th of June at 7:33 a.m.
Have you any other question?
I think Kirsty was going to answer about.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stewart, yes, we have an air quality action plan currently for the whole of Perth City. So we are constantly looking and constantly reporting back to the Scottish Government on what actions we're taking to improve air quality. In terms of that funding for Bridgend and Athol Street, we have undertaken in the past focused improvements in certain areas in our hotspots, but what we've tended to find is that you might get very small incremental changes, but it can often have a knock-on effect at some of our other hotspot areas. Therefore, the preference is always to look at a more holistic improvement situation. And on that basis, that is why the Crosstail Link Road has been such a focus on trying to improve the overall situation within Perth City.
Thank you to Director Rent and Ms Stephen and for their answers to that point. I'd also like to thank the Chief Executive for her clarification about receiving contact. The point I was trying to draw out, excuse me, Deputy Provost, the point I was trying to draw out was that in preparation of the health assessment, which necessarily forms part of the environmental impact assessment, given that the health questionnaire has gone out from Sweco and the Council in Scone, that engagement should have happened from the Council and Sweco to Public Health and NHS Tayside should have happened at a much earlier stage, and it shouldn't be up to those consultants and experts.
Take that as a supplementary question, and maybe Sweco want to comment on their contact with Dr Hyland, who seems to be featuring in our debate.
Yes, please. We went to speak to Jackie Hyland in September last year and discussed with her the various impacts that we were looking at with regards to the Crosstail Link Road for noise, air quality, and also under the new 2017 EIA regulations, that gives you much stronger grounds to all consider health in a much wider sphere. So we had that discussion with Jackie. She was consulted with as part of our scoping exercise as well. So we have been in consultation with her through this process.
And there's the record of these consultations?
Yes, we have meeting minutes as well.
Thank you. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I have two questions and I'll ask them separately if that's permissible.
Yep.
Thank you. The first one is on health. I am aware, we've spoken about the lots of different assessments that have been undertaken, technical, financial, environmental, economic, etc. And I'm aware that there is a health questionnaire that is being done. There are two parts to this question. The first is, why has the health impact assessment not been completed when we're having this paper being brought forward to us today for a final decision on the route? And the second question is, as far as I'm aware, this is not the way in which this health impact assessment is being done is the form of a questionnaire. Only a few of the questions which are on health-related matters. Why are we not following NHS public health best practice in relation to a health impact assessment? I appreciate it might not be a requirement, but I think this council, we should be looking to follow best practice wherever we can.
We'll take that one first.
Yep.
Echo.
Yes, so that was part, and the reason really for the meeting with Jackie back in September was to discuss the scope and the proposed approach to our health impact assessment. That approach and methodology was set out clearly in the EIA scoping report, which was uploaded to the planning portal. There was also a digital version that was uploaded to the Perth Futures Transport website to try and make sure it was as available to everybody as possible. The email that we have back from Jackie is to say thank you very much for your consultation. I have no comments on what is proposed. To take a point on the HIA questionnaire, the questionnaire was meant to be part of the public consultation events which were planned earlier this year. They were organised but then were put on hold so that we could undertake this review of the potential northern route alignment. The decision was taken for that HIA questionnaire to still be published online, and there were hard copies left in 3 libraries as well. That was very much part of baseline data gathering exercise, and a part of a health impact assessment for a proposed project is to look at the potential impacts on health that that project could bring. We are already considering air quality and noise, which are some of the key ones that you would always consider. But one of the main ones for Cross Tay is also to do with access to green space, well-being, active travel. Part of the questionnaire has taken cognizance of the place standard tool, but also, and I've got a list here of the 5 main guidance documents that are out there just now on how to draft these. And the whole purpose of the questionnaire is to ask the community where they feel there are gaps in access to green space and open areas. It is not the whole assessment, it is part of gathering baseline data.
Thank you. And your second question, Councillor Purvis?
There was a second part, well, the first part to that question, which was why the health impact assessment hasn't been finished before this is coming. I think we touched on why the health questionnaire hadn't been done, but I think it's important to clarify why the actual health impact assessment hasn't been completed when we're being asked to make this decision today.
Okay, do you want to add anything to your response in that regard? Thank you.
I think one of the things that has become apparent as we've been going through the various questions and queries that have come through is that the key concerns around the alignment of Cross Tay and the position with H29 is to do with air quality, and the concern is about pollution. That has been fully assessed in our comparative report and has been looked at in terms of comparing the results of both routes against each other. The health impact assessment is continuing to be prepared, and there will be various levels of further consultation, including, regardless of which route, further public consultation events. I think it would have been premature to complete a full assessment at this stage.
Councillor Purvis,
okay, I don't think I'm assured by that answer, but I'll ask my next. Oh, microphone went off there. The next one's on community consultation. I note from the report there's quite an extensive appendix about the objections of a few landowners and householders in the report. There is also the summary of the poll from Schoonan District Community Council, and while we now have the comments that were included as part of that public consultation exercise that they undertook. Those were not included until Councillor Stewart requested them to be so. My question is, why have we, when we as a council should certainly be listening to our communities, it seems that in the summary of the poll, where an effort has been made to show what a small segment of the population that it is, and using the National Record of Scotland population estimate to say how many people responded to the poll, what the percentage of the population that is, why has a similar approach not been taken with the small number of people who are objecting, which would be 0.0% almost of the population? And as a wider point, why has, it seems to me from reading the report that the report places a greater emphasis on the objections of a very small number of residents rather than the wider community in Scone.
Go back to Sweco for that one, please. Yeah.
The answer is simple to that, is that we didn't go out to public consultation on an alternative route. So we are unable to provide full consultation results on that. The poll was put in, the comments from residents directly affected by a move, we didn't actually contact them for comments. They obviously heard about the poll and felt that they should write to us directly to make their views known. We did consult with landowners and tenants on the proposal to move the route, purely because they are directly involved in that, and we have been in basically in negotiation with landowners since 2017 now. The poll results, the percentage are also given by Scone Community Council as well in their summary page.
I'm going to move on now to Councillor McDade, and I've got Councillor Sarwar after that, and Councillor McEwen. I'm proposing then to draw the questions to a close. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I have two questions. I'll ask them separately because they're quite different, if that's okay. My first question is for the Chief Officer for Health and Social Care. Taking the UK Government figure mentioned by Professor Belch, I've calculated a figure relating to pollution-related illnesses of between 18.4 million and 31 million up to 2025 for Perth and Kinross residents. Would he agree that that sounds approximately right? And can he give us any more detailed costs on the lifetime cost of treating someone in Perth and Kinross with a pollution-related illness?
Thank you, Councillor McDade. I'm afraid I'm no expert in public health and the cost of those illnesses. Certainly we can explore that figure and establish its efficacy and the basis of it. I have had no involvement in this process, and I'm afraid at this stage I would need to defer to colleagues who have been more actively involved in relation to these aspects. Your second question, please, could you remind me?
My second one was about the cost of treating someone with a pollution-related illness, as in the lifetime cost over their lifetime.
Similarly, I am afraid I don't have any information on that. I would defer to colleagues who have more professional clinical expertise in that regard. But certainly we can establish that for you and provide the committee with that information if necessary in due course.
Thank you. And your second question?
My second question, Deputy Provost, is given the almost certainty that our government's going to pass dramatically increased regulation around pollution with the climate emergencies that both governments have declared, is there a risk that these regulations force the council and the developer to change the master plan to provide a significant buffer zone to reduce pollution risk? And part of that question is for the head of legal in terms of under current laws, could future residents sue the council for putting them at increased risk given what we know at the moment?
Mr. Marshall.
If I can cover the first point, I think we're seeing a fundamental change already in process in terms of environmental regulations generally. If anything, I would say the increased emphasis in the government in accelerating the process to cleaning up our carbon footprint will help the situation and an acceleration in improvements in vehicles, the uptake of electric vehicles, etc. And as has been said already, when we come to the stage of Phase 3 and Phase 4 of Scone North, the current estimate based on the developer's projected build rate is it will be 2029 and beyond, we will have a much clearer idea of the progress in decarbonising the transport fleet, and we will have more detailed information at that stage on the actual effect of the Cross-Tay Link Road long before any houses go there, and we'll be able to make planning decisions about whether there is an issue with air quality or noise at that time, given that the road as it stands in its design, including the road verges, is already approximately, Gillian's going to tell me the figure.
The setback, basically from there to road is...
The setback from the CPO extents at the moment to the roadside is approximately 18 metres on the south and 12.5 on the north.
So and that's within the boundary of the road. So there's already a fairly substantial barrier there, but these decisions are for a future date when we have a more complete picture of progress with vehicle emissions and the actual pollution levels at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Sarwar, have you a supplementary?
Sorry, no, I'm the second part of my question, which is for the head of legal, in relation to could future residents sue us for putting them at increased risk, given what we know at the moment?
First of all, you'd have to actually establish that we were negligent in some way and had acted irresponsibly, and there was actually a justifiable claim. On the basis of the information that's been presented to me, I cannot see any situation where we're acting in such a way that would attract a liability in that case.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. You'll be happy most of my questions have been asked, but just a few on the technical comparative assessment. Mr. Deans, earlier you spoke about the transport modelling and how it was negligible. Do you feel that it would actually be better to have put that in the no clear preference, that tick?
Councillor, you're on the table, I presume, is that right?
Sorry.
Do
you want me to ask the next one as well?
No, well, let's deal with one at a time.
I am on the table, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Gillian Fergus.
The reason the existing route is actually preferred is because of the predicted increase on the A94 through Scone, that if the route's further north. So that is why the existing route is preferred on that. It tells you in paragraph 3.14.
Okay.
And your next one?
About noise and vibration, my understanding for this table is that the houses that were taken into consideration were the 5 at the Old Steading. If you take into consideration the housing at H29 for noise and vibration, does that tick box go into the alternative northern route?
Sorry, can I just clarify the question? So, in terms of looking at existing receptors, if you considered the H29 development, would that change it? Is that the query?
If you're considering the effect of noise pollution on the residents of H29, would the box go in the alternative route or in the current?
I think that's where you've got to look at it in the round. So you've got existing residents there just now, and their houses are built and occupied, and there are potential mitigation measures you could employ, including glazing, etc. But the houses in H29 are not built yet, so they can be designed for noise mitigation. There are far more opportunities for that. You can see from the report itself, there has been no noise barriers or buffers included in there. I would say back to the air quality comment, they will have to do detailed design and detailed assessments of noise for those houses as well. I think when you look at the two routes in comparison, the impacts from cumulative traffic are greater from the northern route with regards to noise.
Do you wish to raise a supplementary there or move on to your next question?
I will move on, but I feel that the whole point that we've looked at this, the whole point that you've undertaken this exercise was because of the concerns about H29, and we have to consider that housing, and I really don't feel that that tick is in the right place. Just really quickly, my other question about the air quality and how the modelling that's been used to come to that decision that we're well within the limits. I just wondered what percentage of the fleet has been electric that was taken into consideration.
In terms of the actual percentages, I don't have them, but I can find those for you. We have tried to do a worst case assessment, so we've erred on less electric vehicles than more, to try and give you as much kind of information with regards to the highest concentrations that would be there. The traffic model that we've used has been provided by Sistra, and it's looked at over 7 scenarios. So we've looked at the 2017 base year, there's 2023, and there's a number of scenarios within 2023 looking at what impact does the cross-Tay have, what impact does all the cumulative development have as well, and that's not just including Bertha Park, Lunkerty and Scone, that's also including all other committed developments within Perth. We have a map that will be in the EIR that shows all of the developments that were considered as part of that transport modelling. We've also considered 2038 as a 15-year plus, and that also looks at the cumulative side of things. The electric vehicles, we know that there's policy and there's guidance there, but it's not certain that everything will come off the roads in 2030. So we've tried to do that in a robust case.
Thank you. I've now got Councillor McEwen, and I'm proposing then, I see Councillor Purvis' hand up, but I'm now proposing to move on to the debate stage.
It's a point of clarification
in relation to what we've just heard.
Well, I didn't interrupt because Fiona Sarwar, Councillor Sarwar, apologies, was making her comment, but it's based on the answer to her first question.
If Councillor McEwen would allow us just to proceed with that.
Okay.
Swiftly, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. It was just in relation to what Mr Marshall said about the build rate and obviously the move towards electric vehicles, and that might mitigate it in future. I'm just wondering whether, in line with the in-principle planning consent that they have, whether there's anything, because I genuinely don't know, to do with phasing that's mandatory. I know that we have a lot of examples of things that are in the plan, sites for many years in the future in Kinross, but they're all being built at this moment in time. So can we have any assurance or guarantee that that won't be the case? Because obviously that would then negate the point about vehicles being electric in the future.
Thank you. Mr Marshall.
I think it's very difficult to give any guarantees about build rates within the construction sector. There are external factors such as the current economic climate which affect that. What I can say is that if you take the Belgarvey farm development in Scone, which is an indication of how the market performs in Scone, it was over a 20-year period that development was built. And the average build rates being projected by the developer here are on the optimistic side and higher than they achieved in Belgarvey Farm. So it is the best estimate at the moment. It has been compiled in consultation not just with the individual developer but with Homes for Scotland. But it will change, and you know, in a development like this, which will last 20, 30 years, we will probably see 2 booms in the housing sector and 2 downturns as well. So the best estimate is it will be about 2029 before phase 3 starts.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing that, Deputy Provost.
Councillor McEwen, and this is going to be the last question.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. During this debate, quite long and detailed, a few of my healthcare professionals in public health have been mentioned in the discussion, and there's a couple of points of clarity I'd like on that. I'll ask them both at the same time for experience.
That's fine, we're not in the debate yet, we're still in questions, but carry on with your questions.
Right, so we heard that the Director of Public Health had sent a letter to the Council and has then changed his view on that. Do we have any insight into why he changed that view? And Dr. Hendeland, was she aware of H29
development when she was asked for any advice, just us.
Okay, Mr. Valentine, you go first, please.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor McCune. When I met with Dr. Drew Walker, I reminded him of the process we'd been through. I reminded him of the contact that had been with NHS Tayside and the fact that the H29 site and the Cross Link Road had been involved in various earlier discussions, and following that he agreed to withdraw his remarks.
And the second point?
When we met with Jackie Hindland, we took along maps with us that showed the location of the route. I can't remember if they show exactly where H29 is, but we did discuss the potential impacts and the fact that we would be assessing the receptors located in H29 along with Bertha Park and Lunkerty as part of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the questions and all the responses. One timing point, I don't know if either David or Stephen are available to let upstairs know that my estimate of lunch sometime about 1 o'clock will maybe looks slightly optimistic, but you might want to just pre-warn our colleagues about that, and we'll proceed to the debate. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Before I begin to move this motion, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank our officers who've worked on this project. As ever, they've carried out their work with diligence and expertise, and I would like to assure you that all your work is much appreciated by the Council. I'd also like to thank the deputation for coming along this morning and putting over their work, issuing their work and their presentation today. And I'd also like to thank members who have studied this and scrutinised this proposal for taking the time to do so and for asking the questions this morning. I'll now move to the motion. This report appears before us today as a response to an approach by Scone Community Council that a review of the alignment of the Cross-Tay Link Road between the A93 and the A94 and consider a more northern route avoiding the Scone North housing site H29. This review has been undertaken and we now have a significant amount of information as set out in the report before us, and the extensive appendices and background papers here today. The results are clear. The case for retaining the current preferred route is not only persuasive, it is overwhelming, and it would be imprudent, in my opinion, to do anything other than support the recommendation of the Deputy Chief Executive. The Cross-Tay Link Road is the second phase of the Perth Futures Transport Project. Let us remind ourselves of the success of Phase 1. The A9-A85 project was delivered on time and within budget. It has received local, national, and recently international awards. This has resulted from the professional advice and efforts of both our in-house team and our external advisors. In my opinion, they deserve our trust going forward and our thanks. The Cross-Tay Link Road will provide a more efficient and better connected transport system to improve the mobility of goods and citizens to access the Central Belt, particularly shortening journey times for those in rural towns and communities. Please remember the extent to which this Council has already considered and approved the current route of the Cross-Tay Link Road. In particular, the approved corridor and the Scone North site have been part of the adopted local development plan since February 14. The Council first approved the route on this route in December 16. The Council again approved both the route and the Scone North site when it approved the proposed development plan and consultation in November 17. It then granted planning permission in principle for the Scone North site in May 18 and again approved the route as part of the proposed local development plan in August last year. There were two main reasons advanced by the Community Council for moving the route northwards, namely road safety and air quality. More recently, emphasis has been placed upon health to justify this potential move. In relation to road safety, the design of the preferred route has been progressed taking account of specific concerns of the community, with input from the Scone North developer. In truth, any road properly designed and constructed by this council will be done in accordance with all national design standards. For clarity, the advice we have received is that the current preferred route has fewer hazards and can ensure greater connectivity and accessibility for non-motorised users. In short, there is no case to be made for rerouting the Cross-Tay Link Road based on road safety concerns. In relation to air quality, the report is clear, and this information has been expanded upon by Mrs. McLean, the Environmental Manager, and from our consulting engineer, Sweco. We are told that the emissions predicted for the development of the Scone North site as a result of the preferred route of the Cross-Tay Link Road will be substantially below the national air quality thresholds, and that is important. Hence, the case for moving the route based on air quality considerations has not been substantiated. Against this, let me be clear that we are jeopardising by moving what we are jeopardising by moving to a northern route, and I wish to make 3 points. One are the additional costs. We are advised that the northern route will result in wasted revenue expenditure of beyond £500,000. We are advised that the additional capital costs will be a minimum of £7.1 million based on the current rates and in accordance with national guidance. We shall jeopardise external Sustrans match funding of £8.5 million and the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to improve the way our citizens move around this area. This funding is at the heart of Phase 4 of the Perth Transport Futures project. The abortive revenue expenditure will have to be addressed in the capital programme and will have to be reconsidered and some current committed projects will have to be reassessed and revisited. My second point, we are told that the delay at the northern route will mean a minimum delay of 17 months. As a consequence of this action, some development sites will continue to be constrained and economic growth in Perth will be stifled. The development planning process of LDB2 will become uncertain, and there is a potential risk that applications are developer-led and not as planned and preferred by this council. Associated with the delay is a substantially greater uncertainty as to whether the northern route can actually be delivered. We know that some of the affected landowners are strongly opposed to it, as are the immediately adjacent residents. It lacks the same level of support from the development plan, and the gap funding has yet to be identified. Our external advisors have expressed less confidence in the compulsory purchase agreements, and the planning process will be delayed as a result. Importantly, and in relation to air quality, we need to have at the forefront of our minds the significant air quality exceedances that already exist in Perth City Centre. These will be perpetuated for longer than necessary. Personally, I cannot support this option. My third point, the report reminds us of our statutory duty to deliver best value. This will be done by approving the recommendation for the current preferred route. There are different criteria which are drawn on to assess best value. However, on any assessment, it is clear to me that only the preferred route will achieve this. For the reasons I've given before, I'm happy to move this paper to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett, to second.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I want to second Councillor Lyle in moving the recommendation of this report to progress the original route for the Cross-Tay Link Road. As a member for the Perth City Centre ward, whose residents in the Main Street, Bridge End, Athol Street and Barrack Street corridors already experience and endure poor air quality and exceedances of pollutants in close proximity to 2 primary schools, I want to see rapid progress on the construction of the Cross-Tay Link Road and to bring about the reduction in vehicle movements and congestion in my ward to improve the health of residents currently exposed to health risks and suffering respiratory conditions in the here and now. Provost, I'm not so selfish or short-sighted as to wish to export such poor air quality and pollutants from my ward to anybody else. I received an email from Scoonan District Community Council yesterday asserting that the current route would make for a very unsafe environment for Scone, in particular for the future residents of H29. But this isn't borne out or supported by the technical assessment. The technical comparative assessment does demonstrate a preference for the north route for air quality in terms of receptors and magnitude, but only with regard to proximity of future H29 houses, which, as we've heard, are not due to be built for another 10 years. In section 312 of the report states that air quality, which will be well within the air quality objectives for both routes, and that's without the need for any mitigation to be proposed. And I'm also aware that this was an area where members sought and received assurances at the members' briefing earlier this week. So to be clear, there is no danger of excessive NOx and particulate emissions in Scone or for future H29 residents under either scenario. Only a negligibly greater amount of CO2 emissions generated by the current route compared to the northern route. However, rerouting the CTLR delays improvements in air quality of between 14 and 21% by a year and a half for residents in Bridgend, Athol Street and Barrack Street and their environs. Provost, with regard to members' comments in the press yesterday, I'd like to ask, how can it be that any member of this council who bothers to pause for even the briefest of moments to analyse and consider the causes and factors exacerbating poor air quality in Bridgend, Athol Street and Barrack Street, could they fail to overlook a sequence of 9 sets of traffic lights and 2 primary schools over just 2 miles of roadway, bounded to a large extent by tenements fronting onto the street and creating pollution canyons at residents' front doors and windows, which are only a pavement's breadth away from the very slow-moving and for considerable periods of time stationary, idling vehicles stop-starting their passage through the city centre, and not see the difference between that and the blank canvas in planning terms at Scone North. It's beyond me, Provost. Someone who can't be bothered to do the basics and is in no position to lecture the rest of us about listening to our communities or on best value. Provost, I can't justify a completely unnecessary 17-month delay to improving air quality for my constituents, and nor can I justify the increased costs associated with changing the route on the basis that delivers no appreciable benefits to Scone residents, despite a price tag of £7.6 million. This isn't just about the money, but it's also about the potential knock-on impacts to the Sustrans bid and the deliverability of a huge package of active travel infrastructure and the Perth Cycle Network Master Plan. Provost, section 5.4 of the report provides members with a clear assessment of best value considerations, stating that there is no persuasive case to be made for departing from the current preferred route, no evidence that adopting the northern route provides any greater efficiency, economic benefit, cost effectiveness or added benefit, whereas there is clear evidence that the deviating from the current route will incur significant additional financial costs and delays. Provost, the case for the current CTLR is compelling and evidence, and with abundant clarity, the alternative is neither. I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Do we have an amendment?
Yes,
Councillor Stewart.
Deputy Provost, with permission, I'd like to bring forward an amendment and I'd ask for that.
Have we copies of that available?
Circulated
we'll circulate these, please, and just hold on a moment till that's sent down. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. So the amendment reads that the Council will note the contents of Report 19189 and the Technical Comparative Assessment. We note the advice on best value. But we're aware that best value must be interpreted in more than purely financial terms, and that there is a particular requirement to achieve sustainable development within the section on best value in the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003. We believe that the Council can go further than meeting the minimum statutorily required levels of air quality, and we believe that the northern alignment detailed in the report will still address air quality issues at Bridgend and the city centre, but will better serve future residents of Scone North housing development in terms of community links, active travel and air quality, and therefore overall health and well-being. That it would avoid future costs to the public sector associated with ill health, such costs including but not limited to those accruing to the Council itself, and that any additional investment now can be regarded as a spend to save, thus fulfilling the requirement to achieve best value, and therefore that the Council requests that the Council should approve the alternative northern route as set out in the report, and as noted in the report, address those financial implications from such a decision at the next budget setting meeting in February 2020. So I want to address some of those points in order, and also some of the comments that I've heard from the leader and the convener of housing. The paper has come about because Scone District Community Council raised concerns with their 4 ward councillors that a major road is intended to go through the middle of the Scone North H29 development. Their concerns were mainly about road safety, air quality and pollution, but also about health, the consequent effects on health and active travel and connectivity as well. It was I who put these concerns to senior officers, who agreed to relook at the route of the CTLR, the Crosstail Link Road, and investigate the possibility of a route that avoids H29. That's the northern route that you read about in the paper today. First of all, we've heard about some of the scoring issues in the paper. There was one correction issued today. There was a correction issued last week, actually. There was an amended version of the papers came out because the scorings, the assigned scorings in the paper were wrong. Concerns have been raised not only about the scorings that have been identified as being wrong. Climate change was identified, climate effect was identified as being wrong, and obviously later in this meeting we will be discussing a motion relating to the climate emergency, but also about noise and vibration, people and communities, and so on. And in terms of air quality, the paper says that there is no difference in air quality, although the comparative assessment does say that there's a substantial difference in air quality. In terms of people and communities, the argument in the comparative assessment report is based on an argument about bus routes through the H29 development in 10, 15 years hence, but doesn't take account of the fact the new community will be bisected by a major road, effectively splitting one side from the other. An officer of the council was asked by a fellow elected member recently, this week in fact, an officer of the council who lives in Scone, you live in Scone, what do you think about this? Well, the Crosstail Link Road is definitely needed, came the answer. And that's the answer that you've heard from Scone District Community Council today. The Crosstail Link Road is definitely needed, but this was the first I heard about why, about the Crosstail Link Road going through the new housing development. Why would you do that? And I think that's the question that members here today have to ask. The leader of the council identified that the Sustrans money, as we're talking about active travel, the leader of the council identified that the Sustrans project might be, the money from the Sustrans project might be lost. And indeed the report does suggest that there is a risk that we may lose funding from Sustrans if we move the Crosstail Link Road route. I think, and I would contend, that it would seem unlikely that a body committed to promoting active and sustainable modes of travel would cut our funding for choosing to move a road in order to reduce pollution levels and to make a new housing development both safer to get around, for both residents and primary school pupils from the primary school site identified in phase 3 in the in-principle master plan. The report does suggest that a delay in the Crosstail Link Road might mean that we have to introduce a low emission zone in Perth, but as I drew out in my questioning, it was there is £100,000, and if more were required on the recommendation of officers, I'm sure the administration could find that money, or the council officers could find that money. There is £100,000 set aside specifically in the budget for air quality mitigation measures in Bridgend and the centre of Perth. In terms of Councillor Barrett's point that I had not analysed or looked into these issues in detail, it was my suggestion, that that money was put into last year's capital budget because I was aware of these issues in advance and had thought about them. And so the money that is in the budget to alleviate the issues in his ward and other fellow members' wards was there at my insistence.
Councillor Stewart, I was fairly generous with the 5 minutes that I allowed the Leader of the Council to propose the motion. I'm being equally generous with you, but you're now nearly into injury time. Okay. So would you like to sum up, please? Right, just a couple of points then. Last year, fellow members of the Council were gracious enough to elect me to, appoint me to be Vice Chair of the Integration Joint Board. In that role, some of the elected members who also sit on the IJB will be aware that I have been advancing the cause of public health, and in terms of a strategic commissioning plan that looks 3 years hence, I have been insisting that we should look not only at what we can do to promote the health and well-being of deal with health and well-being issues in our immediate 3-year plan, but look forward to what we can do to promote the ill health and well-being and reduce the costs associated with ill health in 10 and 15 and 20 years' time. Best value is about continuous improvement in the performance of the local authorities' functions. My question, I think, that I would put to members today is whether the southern route really is an improvement. Is it best value? I contend that it is not. I had thought of promising, Deputy Provost, to throw myself down on the ground in front of the bulldozers for the southern routes. Please don't do that, Councillor.
Well, I thought it might be too much of an incentive.
Would you like to conclude your remarks, please?
Too much of an incentive to fellow members. But I would just suggest to you that as we have a Perth Kinross Council priority in the Tayside Joint Public Health Protection Plan, that to develop air quality action plans, why not avoid the need for a future one now and protect the health and well-being of those future residents who are the people here who are without voice. I can commend my amendment to Councillor.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I won't be as long. The goal of the CTLR is to reduce the build-up of traffic and the resulting air and noise pollution in Bridgend and Perth City Centre, a worthy goal. However, it is my real concern that the current route of the CTLR, which in a few years' time will be going through a major housing development, carries with it the risk of increased air and noise pollution for the residents of Scone North. As shown here today by the deputation from Scone District Community Council and from the signatures and comments collected from residents in the Scone area, there is a high level, although I recognise not 100%, support for the northern route. I understand that for some of my colleagues the delay and possible costing is too great a price for this altered route. I have no desire to see the CTLR delayed. However, I do believe we have a duty to future-proof the road as much as possible. As Ward Councillor for communities along the trunk A93 road, I know firsthand the dangers and difficulties of residential areas so close to these large, busy roads. Of course, it would have been preferable to have had this intervention much earlier and had it been possible a lower price tag, but we are where we are. and I feel it is my responsibility today to stand with the residents of Scone North and to protect future communities from the same problems we are trying to alleviate. For these reasons, I am happy to second the amendment and ask colleagues to consider carefully how they vote today.
Thank you. Now, contributions to the debate. I don't want to stem anybody's thoughts or words, but brevity and sticking to the point would be appreciated by everybody in the room. Who wants to go first? Silence. Okay. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm going to make a few comments just basically as a convener of planning and development, if I may. I'm fully aware of many developments that depend on the Crosstail Link Road's completion, and to defer when the evidence to delay it does not back it up will have a detrimental effect on construction and on businesses over the whole of Perth and Kinross, not just in Scone, everywhere else. Now, I note the concerns that have been raised about a lack of detailed assessment on air pollution, especially to future residents that have still to choose to live in a proposed route, along a proposed route, and I'm afraid that shows a lack of understanding of the planning process. I question how our council can be asked to accurately assess on the impact of residents that we don't have, living in houses that don't exist, that won't be built for 10 to 15 years, that we don't have detailed plans for, along a route that is assessed by the same planning department who controls the mitigating conditions that will be applied to the detailed plans as and when they're presented. I'm equally surprised to see a direct link drawn to traffic that's travelling through Bridgend, where there are 4-storey buildings in close proximity to the road, trapping in CO2 emissions and creating that canyon effect that we hear about, and a proposed route through a currently undeveloped site where the homes and spacing are yet to be proposed, never even mind decided. This is a road route that will benefit residents all across our area, and we have to be mindful that we are here to represent all of Perth and Kinross, not just the people of Scone. It will ease existing traffic issues in the centre of our town and city, and I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think I'm reflecting on questions that have been asked today, and indeed some of the contributions we've already heard. We have a unique opportunity before us today to decide on the route of a road that will be there for decades and potentially centuries to come. And if we look at, coming back to Councillor Lane's point earlier, the roads that exist today, they have been there for decades and centuries. Roads tend not to move very often, and the only times we tend to build new ones, we tend to build bypasses due to pollution. And I think it's very important that we reflect on that. This road will serve tens of thousands of residents and visitors, and is being put forward in relation to current issues around pollution in Bridgend and Perth city centre. And it seems unwise to me to use this opportunity instead to create new pollution problems for new residents, when we could actually take the opportunity to remove it for both sets of residents, both in Bridgend and the city centre, and the future Scone residents. The only reason for the delay is that the northern route wasn't considered earlier, and indeed that is unfortunate, and the increased cost is also unfortunate, but this cost will be dwarfed by the future costs to health and social care. Those numbers that we heard earlier and the numbers that we see in terms of the cost to health budgets, the health budget is due to reach 50% of the Scottish Government budget in the next few years. These are real costs, and the real cost now, and we really need to think about that. This is going to be a defining moment for this council, and if we take the wrong decision now, it will ring down the decades, and some of us may be in this chamber and some of us may not when we have to answer for those issues. I'm hoping not to be here, to be honest. But as representatives of the people of Perth and Kinross, we need to take into account those future residents, and we have that unique situation to take the strategic long-term impact into account at this moment in time. This is not a party political issue. There are members across the chamber on both sides who will vote on either way, I'm sure. And it's very much important, I think, this council considers the strong view we've heard from the communities that are going to be affected, but also the effects on future residents. And we all aspire to build healthier and more environmentally sustainable communities. So let's take this opportunity, which is a significant opportunity, to do that. And I would urge members to vote for the northern route.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. I'll be happily supporting the amendment when we come to a vote today, for the reason that if I put myself into the shoes of, let's say, a parent with 3 children who's moved into a brand new house on the northern side of this route, if we were to build it in what I'd say is the wrong place, that parent will not be encouraging their children to walk, cycle, scoot, hop, anything else to school because of this road, regardless of whether the vehicle fleet is electric or not, whether the lorries are electric or not, which will take a lot longer. There will still be a perceived problem of safety. And so that family with 3 kids will be getting in and out of their car for every single journey they make, whether that's school, shopping, doctors, whatever else they're doing, work as well. And I think just to finish, I'd say as well that I've every confidence that if we were to ask officers to deliver the northern route, there will be creative ways in which we can deliver it without the, perhaps that we'd be able to ambitiously achieve it in less time than is currently forecast or with less money. That's only a hope I have. It's not any kind of criticism, just a hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Now that I've got Councillor Simpson next, do I see any other hands? Councillor Purvis and Councillor Lang. Okay, I would propose then to hear these 3 speakers and then move to the vote. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I've been consistent in my view of any proposal for a CTLR since I was first elected as a councillor for the then Scone ward in 2003. I still remain unconvinced that any benefits of this new road to the present residents of Scone will be as great as predicted, no matter which route is chosen. And this is a view shared by many people I speak to on a daily basis. Therefore, I'm minded at present to abstain, as neither route can be justified as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Other than, I think, Councillor Simpson, who has been long and principled in his stance against the road, I think all councillors here support the need for the Cross-Tay Link Road and the benefits that it will have to Bridgend, the city of Perth and the wider area. But I think we're in danger here of making a very bad mistake. We have heard about the issues of electric vehicles and some of the problems of air pollution might be mitigated in the future along with the build-out rate, but the Scottish Government's current plans, which are of course welcome, are to start phasing out vehicles now, only cars and vans by 2032, which means the HGVs, which will also use this route, will still be using things that are polluting the atmosphere. I also think there's an important point to note that there's discussion within our own party as part of the leadership contest. Many of the candidates have committed already to a pledge for a legal right to clean air, and all of the rest have said that they will at least explore that. So I would encourage my colleagues in the Conservative group to reflect on that and not to be on the wrong side of this argument. But this isn't just about air quality. I think this is fundamentally bad planning and bad placemaking. As Councillor Barnacle alluded to earlier, I don't know if many of you have experienced the same concerns that I have had from residents with the A977, and I presume it's the same for people who have the A93 and A94 in their wards. But if we were building a new road today, we would not build it through towns and villages that experience the heavy traffic. And I think that's a real concern, and we still have the opportunity to change the route now. We've also heard about the various health considerations. We talk a lot about prevention and early intervention, spend to save, preventative spend, whatever you want to call it. The costs of putting in a road like this will far outweigh the cost that has been indicated in the paper. So I think we need to reflect very carefully on this. Back in 2016, when the route was first presented to councillors, the new housing development at H29 was not shown on the diagram with the route for the CTLR, and this is a new council from 2016, the majority of councillors being new. So I think that all of us who are here, we have a final opportunity now to correct what I think was a mistake. There might be a cost, but it pales in insignificance to the future cost, not just in terms of health, but in terms of placemaking, in terms of road safety, and many other issues. And I would encourage everyone to think very carefully about the decision that they make today, and side with the communities, but also in the long run, side with the taxpayer.
Thank you, Councillor Lang, and then we'll move to the vote.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Much as I was almost swayed by the thought of seeing Councillor Stewart confronting the bulldozers, I too will be supporting the amendment. I feel that everybody wants the Crosstail road link. Everybody can see the benefits of it in the city and for everywhere else. I think that I take issue with the convener of planning. This is what we're doing just now. We're planning for the future. These houses will be built. They're scheduled for it. So we should not be taking a problem that we have just now and transporting it into the future. We should be taking the chance now so that we're not having to face the problem in the future. So for that and a lot of other arguments, I have quite a few issues with the table and the scoring and all that as well. I will be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, and thank you all for the contributions towards the debate. We'll now move to the vote. Councillor Murray-Lyle, do you want to sum up?
Thank you for the opportunity, Deputy Provost. I think the debate has been well made. I think the officers have put over their points succinctly. I thank the members for their varied opinions in the debate, but I'm happy to move to the vote.
Thank you.
Councillors, we are on agenda number 6, report number 19189, Perth Transport Futures Project Phase 2, Crosstail Link Road, the review of alignment between the A93 and A94. We have a motion by Councillor Lyle, seconded by Councillor Barrett. The recommendation is as detailed in the report. We have an amendment by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Sarwar, as detailed in the amendment circulated to you today. In terms of Standing Order 58, voting will be by roll call. When I call out your name, can you please indicate whether you are voting for the motion, amendment or abstaining? Councillor Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Baird.
Motion.
Councillor Band.
Motion.
Councillor Barnacle. Councillor Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Brock. Councillor Audrey Coates.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Duggan.
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes. Councillor Gray.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor Jarvis.
Motion.
Councillor Lane.
Amendment.
Councillor Lyle.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McDade.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Provost Malloy.
Motion.
Councillor Parrott. Councillor Pover. Councillor Purvis. Councillor Rebeck. Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson. Councillor Sarwar.
Amendment.
Councillor Shires. Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart.
Amendment.
Councillor Waters. Councillor Williamson. Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Councillors, we have 26 votes for the motion, 11 votes for the amendment, with 1 abstention. The motion is therefore carried.
Thank you. That concludes consideration of that item, so the report is approved.
Deputy Provost, I wonder if under standing orders I could record my dissent from the decision.
I'm sorry, Councillor Stewart, I didn't hear you.
Under standing orders, if I could record my dissent from the decision, please.
Yeah, yes, indeed, you may indeed. And that's perfectly appropriate. I would suggest, I would recommend, Provost, that we reconvene at 2:15 to continue the other items on the business.
Yes, I definitely would agree with that. Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. I think we can resume now. We'll go back to item 3, notice of motions in terms of Standing Order 39. The first one is the Period Poverty Campaign. Can I invite Councillors Sarwar and Bailey to speak to the motion as set out in the agenda?
Thank you, Provost. Just take a minute for my colleague. And also that. Following on from the Council Leader's invitation to bring a motion to full Council on the matter of VAT on sanitary products, we have in front of us today the motion which states, in the UK, VAT is still currently applied to sanitary products. The campaign for period dignity acknowledges the impact of costly sanitary products and other period-related products on women and girls, especially those affected by lower incomes and domestic abuse. The dignity, health and well-being of women and girls should come before collecting VAT on items which are necessities and not luxuries. The Council therefore supports the campaign for period dignity and asks the Council Leader to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, calling for all VAT to be removed from sanitary products. Research by the grassroots group Women for Independence reveals nearly 1 in 5 women have experienced period poverty. This is when females struggle to pay for basic sanitary products on a monthly basis, which has a significant impact on their hygiene, health and well-being. Nearly 1 in 5 respondents said that they had to go without period products because of finances, while 1 in 10 said they'd been forced to prioritise other essential household items such as food over buying sanitary wear. The most common alternative used was toilet roll, with others citing rags, old t-shirts, clothes, socks and newspapers. 17% said they had at some point relied on charitable sources such as food banks or friends, with a significant number turning to public toilets to access free toilet roll. 22% of respondents reported they were not able to change their products as often as they would like to, with 11% of those describing a significant health impact because of this. The work of groups like Women for Independence, Unison and Unite's campaigns for period dignity, and so many others up and down the country has raised the issue of period poverty, and in Scotland, thanks to the work of the Scottish Government and local authorities, we now have free sanitary products available in many public buildings, including schools and community centres. Access to sanitary protection should be as easy to access as toilet roll and as comfortable to ask for too. However, this motion underlines the point that any idea that sanitary products are a luxury item that should incur any VAT charge is outdated and prejudiced against women. In the UK, sanitary protection products currently incur a low VAT rate, unlike Jaffa cakes and other essential cakes with zero VAT. In January 2018, the European Commission brought forward a legislative proposal to enhance member states' flexibility to apply reduced and zero rates of VAT, although there is no firm timetable for these changes. And to date, the UK government have not published any specific details as to the UK's post-Brexit relationship with the EU on VAT, beyond stating its ambition for an agreement on common processes and procedures to avoid the need for any new VAT-related border controls on goods moving between the UK and the EU. As an elected local member, I wish to play my part in removing the effects of period poverty, the stigma that can still be attached to getting your period, especially at school, and in whatever way possible lessen the financial burden that often falls to women to shoulder. I urge colleagues across the Chamber to support this motion and, where possible, in future budgets to support the work of period poverty charities and policy implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sarwar. Councillor Bailey, to second the motion.
Thank you, Provost. I'm very happy to second this motion, which puts this council on record as being pro-gender equality. VAT is a regressive tax which hits the poorest hardest at the best of times. The regressive nature of VAT is at its worst when it's applied to items that are not indeed luxuries. Sanitary products are must-haves. For that reason...
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Are there any further comments or contributions, or will we just agree the report, the motion?
Agree the motion.
Agree? Thank you. Oh, there's somebody. Who's that? Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Provost. You were looking that way for me again, Provost. We talked about this the last time, didn't we?
Well, you know why.
The Conservative group are happy to support this motion. We thank Councillor Sarwar and Councillor Bailey for bringing it to our attention today. Countries around the world, from Canada to Kenya and from India to Australia, have been scrapping the tampon tax after similar campaigns. But it turned out that Parliament and Government are powerless to do so. EU VAT harmonisation rules require tampons and other sanitary products to be taxed at a minimum of 5%. So whilst we're happy for Councillor Lyle to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer on behalf of the Government, it seems to me that the real issue lies with the European Government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. I also support the motion in the principle that VAT should not be applied to essential commodities, and nor should only one section of society be subject to such a tax. There has been research conducted which concludes that the low rates of VAT have only a marginal impact on improving women's access to sanitary products, and that's why the availability of free sanitary products is so important to me, and I welcome the action taken in Scotland to address that, which came with all-party support. Provost, I don't want to quibble with the intention of the motion, but I think that we can do more than simply write to the UK Chancellor of the Exchequer, who, as we've heard, isn't able to reduce the 5% VAT rate to zero, whilst we remain subject to EU rules on VAT. The UK already has the lowest rate in Europe on sanitary products, with the exception of the Republic of Ireland, whose zero rate predated the regulations. Provost, we have a brand new crop of MEPs, and I would ask that in addition to the motion, I would ask that the Leader of the Council write to these Scottish MEPs from parties represented in this chamber, expressing this Council's concerns and seeking their support between now and the 31st of October, and hopefully in the longer term too. Provost, Europe hasn't set a date to provide the flexibility for countries to apply zero rates, and our MPs and MEPs in Brussels have a job to do on our behalf. I'll certainly be writing to my Scottish Liberal Democrat colleague Sheila Ritchie in any case, but I would hope that we can press for action on this on the broadest and most effective front possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any other contributions? Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Provost. I just want to add my support to the motion and the principles of it. I think it's patently ridiculous to suggest that sanitary products are a luxury item, and it's disappointing that we haven't seen further action on this before. I just wanted to point out further to some of the comments that have been made that since October 2015, the UK government have been lobbying for the flexibilities to be given to EU member states to remove VAT on sanitary products. And obviously, with our imminent departure from the European Union, the government has reiterated its commitment to that pledge, and then once we have the ability to determine our own VAT rules or sales taxes, has been talked about recently, we'll be able to move to a 0% rate. Since the 2015 budget, the UK government have also been putting the £15 million of annual tax receipts from the VAT on sanitary products that they are legally required to collect to women's aid charities, to reiterate that point that if the UK government were able to put it to 0%, that they would do. And until such a time as we can address that when we leave the European Union, they will continue to provide that funding to women's aid charities, which I think is a very positive step.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. Councillor Lyle.
Just thank you very much, Provost. As the motion asks me to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, just to let you know that I'm happy to accede to that request and happy to support the motion. As far as Councillor Barrett and his request is concerned, I'm also happy to write to all MEPs of all political persuasions and remind them of their responsibilities in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sarwar, are you happy with the suggestion?
I'm happy to accept that suggestion. I would just reiterate that this motion, the heart of this motion is about tackling period poverty. I think that's what needs to be on our minds. That's what I wanted to speak about today, not regulations within the EU. But I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to speak about that in the Council today, and I would ask that on all sides of the Chamber they would keep this in mind in the budget setting process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we agree with the report? The motion? Yep, thank you. The second motion in terms of Standing Order 39 is the climate change emergency. Can I invite Councillor Waters and Sarwar to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Provost. The recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change noted that human activities are estimated to have caused approximately a 1 degree Celsius rise in global warming above pre-industrial levels. The report also models a comparison between a predicted 1.5 degree Celsius global warming and a rise of 2 degrees Celsius. The paper concludes that a 2 degree Celsius rise will be catastrophic and potentially irreversible, with scientists predicting that extreme weather conditions, fires, floods, and droughts will intensify in severity and occurrence, along with an acceleration in the already high extinction rate of species on the planet. The UN Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services report also echoes these findings, noting that the damage human beings are causing to the planet. The report notes that climate change is one of the top drivers in creating this damage. Given that this planet is currently heading for a 3 to 4 degree warming, it is essential that global temperature change is limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius. To achieve this, rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society are required. The result of failing to act now will be catastrophic consequences on the biodiversity of nature and human well-being. Regarding the cost of this transformational change, the evidence shows that the global cost of inaction far outweighs the cost of action. If we delay or fail to adequately take action now, future generations will end up paying even more. Importantly, both of these reports highlight that it is not too late to turn things around. However, we must act now. Following on from the advice from the UK Committee on Climate Change in light of the IPCC report, Scotland has added amendments to the upcoming climate change bill to set a 2045 target for net zero emissions. While we have also seen the UK Parliament bring forward a commitment to bring forward legislation with the aim of achieving zero emissions by 2050 as recommended within the report. Whilst many councils have declared a climate emergency, this has already been declared, both by the Scottish Government and the UK Parliament. This motion acknowledges this and is an opportunity to demonstrate that as a council, Perth and Kinross is committed to delivering our part in the response to the declared climate emergency, and that the council is ready to lead by example in the transformational change that is required to meet our commitments to the residents of Perth and Kinross and to the world as a whole. The motion recognises the ongoing work within the council with the low carbon transformational project, including the significant progress being made in reducing our own carbon footprint. However, there is still much to do, and we need to ensure that we engage with our community planning partners, our local communities, our businesses, and other stakeholders in co-producing a strategic delivery plan. I ask the Chamber to back this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Provost. On the doorsteps, in my inbox and on social media sites, there is one issue which, after Brexit, comes up again and again from constituents, and that is the environment. Climate scientists and activists have been campaigning for decades to raise awareness of the devastating effects of pollution and consumerism. And I brought a book with me, and I've got to bring it over here, but the first competition I ever won in primary school was on this issue, and I have brought with me my Young Green Consumer Guide. I recommend if anybody wants to have a look through and see what was being said in the 90s, but it's still quite a worthwhile read. Green issues, global warming, and then climate change are some of the buzzwords used over the years to try and raise awareness and ultimately get governments, multinationals, and citizens to take action about the health of our planet. But the most recent campaigns, including Extinction Rebellion, have called for a much stronger word, a climate emergency. Greta Thunberg, the teenage climate activist from Sweden, puts it like this. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope, but I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if the house is on fire, because it is. As the adults in the room, I believe we owe it to Greta to do just that, to act. Not simply in accordance with legislation or to tick a box, but to really lead the way on how a local authority can take radical steps, to be innovative, and to be the model other councils will want to follow on tackling the climate emergency. In many of our services, we show this level of commitment. In our Education and Children's Service, for example, outstanding report after report is rightly a source of great pride for us all. Our regional collaborative agency is an example to the rest of Scotland. Should it not be that we also strive to excellence in our efforts to fight for all our children and young people in this, one of the most significant issues to face our world? I'm grateful to officers for their help in preparing this motion, for the work that's already been done, and in advance of the work that they will do if the motion is passed. But this is not an issue for officers alone. We must, as elected members, all play our part in leading the way on climate issues. I am pleased to second this motion and ask for your support to send a clear message that Perth and Kinross Council will be a game changer in the fight against the climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sarwar. Are there any comments or contributions? Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Provost. I think this is a very worthwhile motion, and I thank my colleagues for bringing it forward. I think it's important that we embody this motion. Words are absolutely not enough, and it needs to be embedded in every aspect of our work. We need to be looking to be environmentally friendly in everything we do, and we must be cognizant of it in every decision that we take. And I think that it's quite obvious that we could go much further than we already are in terms of how we are environmentally friendly. There are 40 councillors sitting here today. I'm pretty sure pretty much every one of us probably drove. Some of our Lib Dem colleagues will have cycled. I was coming there, Councillor Simpson, don't worry. And they are doing their bit. Some of us do have a bit further to go, so cycling is perhaps not the easiest alternative, but we do need to look at other ways that we can work. And actually, for a lot of our meetings, that might be virtual technology, etc., allowing us to do that. And we actually have to embrace these innovative ways of working, not just as councillors, but across the whole council, because as a local authority that employs thousands of people, we have a much bigger impact than most organisations do in our local area, and we should also lead by example. So I would just urge all colleagues in the chamber to support this motion and support the moves to make this council much more environmentally friendly, and also to keep it in their minds that actually we do need to be doing much more than we're doing, and remembering our rural communities who actually don't have an awful lot of options in some of this stuff, and that we need to be taking that into account too.
Thank you, Councillor McDade. You have a long cycle from Pitlochry just the same, haven't you?
I would indeed.
Councillor Forbes, please.
Thank you, Provost. I support this motion entirely. The Council's already doing great work, partly because it's recognised as being a good thing, but also because a large part of it is government legislation. Things that have been done very recently are things such as the installation of photovoltaic panels out at Friarton, the switch to LED lighting throughout council buildings and streetlights. We use the grid to transfer waste power unused power, between council buildings, electric charging infrastructure for vehicles, the Broxton Low Carbon Transfer Hub, and so on and so on. I can't, of course, pass up the opportunity to mention the good work that was done by all of the officers very recently on the Sustrans bid, and we await the outcome of that with bated breath. The motion mentions the Extinction Rebellion group, and I must make comment on the fact that when the UK becomes the first G7 nation to commit to being net zero, they chose to chain themselves to bus routes, forcing people back into cars whilst lying on plastic bags, and I suspect plastic that may well end up in the waste stream. But I support this motion 100% and it has my full backing. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Provost. I would just like to offer my support to this motion by Councillor Waters and Councillor Salwa. Recognising that we have a climate emergency is a major step forward, and whilst the Council has made inroads into mitigating our effects on the environment, there are limitations that any local authority can do. Stopping climate change will require all of us, irrespective of political viewpoint, to work together. We as a Council cannot do this alone, nor can Scotland, nor can the UK. I believe that climate change is a fundamental reason why we must remain in some shape or form within the European Union. Scientific consensus is that we have not yet reached the point of no return, and that we can reverse the trend. Urgency in action is required, and we are talking years, not decades. Provost, in writing this and to add some perspective to the urgency, it occurred to me that of the elected members here today who will vote on this motion, only the youngest few will know in 60 or 70 years' time whether or not the efforts being made today and in the few years to come will have worked to stop climate change, or if nature finally overwhelmed mankind's ability to control its destiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Provost. I think if you were wanting to understand how our public within Perth and Kinross feel on these green issues, a couple of things that I'm aware of. One, a letter from the climate cafes across Perth and Kinross that is addressed to our Chief Executive and our leader of our council, looking for engagement with the council, looking to sort of mimic the model that they already have in Dundee, where they have an environment forum where members of the public are involved in looking at the council, looking at its issues, looking at its policies and driving that forward. And I hope that's something that the council will embrace. And another thing I think that I'm going to promote is that during this summer in Blairgowrie and Rattray, I'm promoting a school reuse and reuse uniform event where I'm asking for people to donate their school uniforms they no longer need, and they can become available free of charge to anybody within the area who wishes to have them for their children for next term. And the enthusiasm that I've had from that, from parent councils, from other parents who've engaged with me on Facebook is enormous. And I think that just is a good example of showing that our public in Perth and Kinross take our planet and take what we're doing very seriously. And as Councillor Waters says, that this council should be leading on this. We lead on education matters within Scotland. I think we could lead on green issues as well.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks again, Provost. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services have reported a tenfold increase in plastics pollution since the 1980s. I'm especially keen that our use of plastics and single-use plastics in particular, and those of our communities and our community planning partners, is considered by the forum and addressed within the work carried out in the first two bullet points regarding baselining of where we are now and an analysis of our future and current plans and strategies. Provost, with regard to some of the bullets in this motion, the Council is already demonstrating the leadership and we should give recognition for what we are doing to reduce our carbon footprint through solar electricity generation, through the spend to save work that we have done on streetlight LED lamp replacements, which has significantly reduced energy and carbon consumption. In housing, the concerted improvements that we have made to improve the thermal performance of hard-to-heat homes across Perth and Kinross through the external wall insulation programme covering both council and privately owned and rented homes through collaboration with Scottish and Southern Energy and their eco-funding contribution towards those programmes, and throughout all of our council stock with improved draft-proofing, insulated front doors, triple glazing, highly efficient central heating systems, replacing older, less efficient appliances, and the provision of renewable heating technologies in off-grid properties. Clearly, Provost, there are huge implications and challenges about what we do to maintain affordable heating for our tenants if there's to be a switch away from natural gas heating in 10 or so years' time. And the identification of resources, as the mover of the motion pointed out, is key to achieving that step change, and is something that we're going to have to address. I attended a recent meeting of the cross-party group on housing at Holyrood and raised the specific issue with MSPs and key housing stakeholders. So in many areas we're already exemplars. In other areas we need to tap in and get on board with what's going on elsewhere. The Welsh Government have been doing some really positive work on zero carbon and almost zero carbon housing and buildings, but even they, who seem to be ahead of the curve for the rest of the UK governments, believe that the 10-year timetable is unachievable, further highlighting the need for a significant step change nationally to address the climate emergency. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Can we move? Oh, another one. Yeah, Councillor.
I have been here quite a while, right enough. Can I just make reference to a comment Councillor McEwen made and confirm that council officers have arranged to meet the gentleman from the Climate Change Cafe.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Purvis, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Provost. I'm very happy to support Councillor Waters and Councillor Sarwar's motion. I think it is really important that we do all we can locally to try and tackle the problem of climate change. There have been some positive steps forward, as Councillor Forbes alluded to, the UK government's commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. We've also had some positive news earlier this month, where we went for the longest period of time in Britain since 1882 without relying on coal-powered energy. So I think that is positive as well. One of the things that I would just ask if perhaps Councillor Waters would be able to incorporate, or at least officers could take forward when they're considering how they put together some of the things suggested in this motion. And I think Councillor McDade touched on it, is that there are some different and unique challenges that a place that's as rural as Perth and Kinross faces. Many people are reliant on their cars to get about, and if we don't support them to make the change to go to electric vehicles or hydrogen-powered vehicles, or the public transport infrastructure isn't in place, then it's even harder for them to make the change to try and reduce their emissions. And I think that's a different challenge that a more rural area like Perth and Kinross faces. So I think as long as we're cognizant of that fact and take that on board as we go forward, then I'm very happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. Councillor Waters, are you happy with that?
Yeah, happy that there are definitely challenges that will need to be addressed for rural communities and that, and I'm sure officers, as part of the route map and identification resources and looking at transport issues, will take on board. So as part of this is a first step in a process where we need to accelerate what we are doing and building on the good work that we've done as a council. So more than happy to take these things on board.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no more contributions, can we agree the motion? Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is, can we agree the minute of the meeting of the Council of the 24th of April 2019? Item 5, minutes of meetings of committees from the 10th of April to the 22nd of May. Can we agree to note the minutes of the Common Good Fund committees of the 24th of April 2019? It's very quiet voices. Planning and Development Management Committee, 10th of April.
Happy to move, Provost.
Thank you.
Second, Provost.
Thank you. Licensing Committee, 11th of April.
Happy to move, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
Strategic Policy and Resources Committee, 17th of April.
Move for noting, Provost.
Seconded, Provost.
Scrutiny Committee, 17th of April.
Move for noting, Provost.
Seconded, Provost.
Local Review Body, 30th of April.
Move for noting, Provost.
Second, Provost.
Planning and Development Management Committee.
Happy to move, Provost.
30th, thank you.
Happy to second, Provost.
Thank you. Housing and Communities Committee, 15th of May.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
Environment and Infrastructure Committee, 15th of May.
Move for noting, Provost.
Second, Provost.
Licensing Committee, 16th of May.
Move for noting, Provost.
Second, Provost.
Audit Committee, 22nd of May.
Move for noting, Provost.
Second, Provost.
And Lifelong Learning Committee, 22nd of May.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
Thank you very much. Item 7 is the Annual Treasury Report 2018-19. Oh, here we go. I'd like to invite Stuart Mackenzie, Head of Finance, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, Councillors. This report summarises the Council's Treasury activities in 2018-19. The Treasury strategy and activity referenced within the report have either previously been approved by or reported to Council through the regular Treasury strategy and update reports. The Council's Treasury position at the 31st of March 2019 is summarised in Section 2, with commentary on the Council's forecast versus actual borrowing set out in Sections 3, 4 and 5 of the report. The Council undertook £40 million of new borrowing from the Public Works Loans Board to support capital investment in 2018-19. All loans were borrowed at fixed rates at an average rate of 2.2% over an average period of 39.5 years. During the course of the year, the Council also made scheduled repayments of £10 million of Public Works Loans Board debt, together with repayments of Salix Finance. The net increase in borrowing was therefore £29.9 million in 2018-19, with the Council having total fixed-term debt of £383.6 million as at the 31st of March 2019. Average loans fund rates are used as a broad measure of Treasury performance, with Perth Kinross Council's rate shown against the Scottish average in Appendix 2 to the report. The Council's rate reduced from 3.19% to 3% in 2018-19, reflecting both lower PWLB rates and the full impact of debt rescheduling undertaken in 2017-18. This equates to savings of approximately £2.9 million on debt servicing costs compared to the Scottish average. The remainder of the report summarises the Council's loan fund position at the year end, the anticipated borrowing requirements for the 10-year capital programme and investment performance in 2018-19. As previously reported, there were no breaches of compliance with either approved borrowing or investment policies, and the Council's borrowing remains prudent and affordable. Happy to take questions, Provost.
Thank you, Stuart. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Donaldson, I've already got your name down, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, mate. First of all, can I thank Stuart Mackenzie for that report. It's an excellent report, and I think in particular the position relative to other Scottish local authorities and the average interest rate we pay. I want to make a couple of brief comments in a minute, but I've got two direct questions. First of all, the first question is on 6.5, and you've set out, Stuart, the debt payment schedule for over 50 years. That's actually very helpful, as we have the annual report and accounts unaudited coming to us in audit committee next week. But you do show, and you've been moving more and more of the debt to nearer to 50 years, you do have a show one section of over 50 years, 3.2 million. Now, I just wonder, I thought our limit was 50 years, but is this actually saying we could go over 50 years, or is it something special?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I was anticipating a few questions from you. Thank you very much. That's actually a very interesting question, to which I do have a reply. So, in terms of perhaps for members' benefit, the Statutory Loans Fund is really the internal banking arrangements we have for managing cash inflows and outflows within the council. So when you get into the Statutory Loans Fund, you're beginning to get under the hood of our treasury management arrangements. In terms of the £3.2 million shown as being over 50 years, in terms of our existing policy, we don't repay any or plan to repay any debts on operational assets, on assets until they are operational. So if the asset has an operational life of 50 years and you're seeing investment there in 18-19, financial year 18-19, but the asset is yet to become operational, that's what the over 50 years line refers to. Hopefully that's a reasonable explanation of a fairly technical point. In terms of 50 years being a limit, the 50 years actually comes from a now rescinded schedule concerning loans fund management arrangements, which suggested a maximum write-off period of 50 years. But I'm aware that some local authorities, depending on asset type, are writing off debt over a longer period.
Genuinely wasn't trying to catch you out, but it did stand out and it looked unusual. A much more straightforward question. I tried to get John Jennings on this and I got part of the response. I think this does matter, especially the budget review process come the autumn, and it's not that far away. If at present we borrow 1 million on 50-year money, I think at the end of March, the interest payment on that is 21,600. It's probably gone up a little bit since then. But with the capital repayment, the depreciation, assumed depreciation element, we're about in saying what we put through revenue accounts will come to less than 30,000 at present, given low interest rates.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Yes, that's pretty much the case. What we have is effectively two things. We have cash accounting, so in terms of what we have to repay in PWLB loans that we take out, and those are fixed rate loans. But we also have some internal accounting requirements to comply with the code, so we charge things like depreciation, and then at the end of the year we reverse those figures out of the accounts because we have to come back to a figure which relates to the amount of tax we raise locally. So there's an accounting requirement, an international accounting requirement which you see in the accounts, then the reversal of some of those charges out of the accounts back to a cash basis. So we have two things effectively.
Nonetheless, as a rule of thumb, and not getting down to detailed precision, at the moment, if you borrow $1 million over 50 years, the charge to the revenue account is almost certainly going to be less than 30,000.
I think the figure we're using is slightly more than 30,000 because there's debt management expenses as well on top of that. So there's a kind of administrative cost as well, averaging it out. And bearing in mind that we don't borrow for specific assets. We borrow in terms of the generality of the capital programme. Is that helpful?
Yes, okay. Is there any other questions? No. Councillor Lyle, can I ask you to move the report?
Thank you very much. Before I move the report, I'll just make the comment that the 30,000 is each and every year for the 50 years. It's not just the 1 year. Anyway, Provost, in line with best practice, elected members are provided with an annual update on Treasury management activity for the preceding financial year. This report sets out the activity for the 18-19 years and summarises much of the information brought to elected members in the quarterly updates provided throughout the year. The Head of Finance has already provided elected members with further commentary on the activities set out in the body of the report. Once again, Provost, I welcome that there have been no breaches in compliance with the approved investment strategy. I also welcome the significant financial savings delivered by our proactive treasury management, which allows us to protect the frontline services that our citizens in Perth and Kinross Council rely on. Council is asked to note the contents of the report, and I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett, would you like to second it?
Happy to formally second.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any comments on the report? To agree the report? Thank you. Item 8. Councillor Donalds, you had a fair crack of the whip.
If I get here. I did state earlier that I was going to make a comment. And it's this, and it's something I think we should recognise, that at the time of the budget in February, we had a situation where my group argued for 3% council tax increase in the current year, and on the presumption of 3% next, 3% the year after. The administration went for 4% on the assumption of 4% the year after and 4% the year after, which will be an amount in absolute terms of 1/8 within about a year and a half. So there's a significant difference. Yet despite that higher increase, and it's why I asked the question about the borrowing of 1 million and how much that impacts on revenue. Because let us not forget, at the time of the last budget, the administration put forward as its capital budget a piece of paper with only 8 lines on it. Really a complete lack of vision in terms of capital projects, in terms of investment in infrastructure. And I believe we've got to recognise we're about middle ranking in terms of local authorities in Scotland. We pay a much lower average interest rate because of the abilities of our finance team, and we do have leeway for investment in capital projects, in infrastructure, and projects that will give benefit to the people of Perth and Kinross. I state very clearly that we should be taking a much more medium, long-term approach. For instance, on climate change, there may be a number of projects there that we can invest funds in. We're not doing it just now. There's a lack of vision. You look at that capital budget motion and it tells you all. There's a kind of lack of imagination. We need and we can do better than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. If there are no more comments, can we agree the report? Thank you. Item 8, update on Gaelic Language Plan 2018-23. I'd like to invite Jim Valentine, our Deputy Chief Executive, to introduce the report. It's Gillian that's going to do it, is it? Fiona. Fiona, do you want to take it?
Morning Tang, Provost. Can you hear me, councillors?
Not
yes.
very well.
Can you hear me now, councillors? Better. Thank you. Councillors, you approved in December 2017 our second Gaelic Language Plan. Just a reminder, this is a statutory document under the Gaelic Language Act 205. This is a particularly good year for Gaelic, we hope, because 2019 is the year of Indigenous languages, and in Perth and Kinross we have a huge amount of Gaelic and indeed Scots culture and heritage and living culture too, contemporary culture to celebrate. The report in front of you highlights progress from the first year of the plan in relation to the 4 steps for Gaelic, which the plan hinges around, and they include Gaelic as a living language and how we celebrate it and extend its use as such, how we invest in frontline services to promote and extend the use of Gaelic, how we invest in Gaelic learning for our own staff, and finally how we celebrate Gaelic language and culture in our area. And as you know, one of our key achievements recently has been winning the 2021 MOD, Royal National MOD, which will come to Perth in a couple of years. So you're asked, councillors, to note progress with implementing the plan to date, which incorporates, I should say, feedback, formal feedback from Bord na Gaelic, which is the National Gaelic Language Board, on our strengths and our areas for future development. Happy to take questions, and I have colleagues with me here who can deal with questions of detail.
Thank you, Fiona. Are there any questions on the report? No? Okay, Councillor Lyle, can I ask you to move the report? So, can't see you there back there. Councillor McCall, on you go.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the report. I'm very heartened to see that there's a further take-up of the Gaelic language here. I think having a native language that's living and active in our communities is very important. My question really is about the number of qualified teachers that currently exist both for schools and for adult learning, and not just in Perth and Kinross but generally throughout Scotland, and if there are any barriers to recruitment or issues with recruitment of appropriately qualified staff to further develop the use of Gaelic in our schools and our communities. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Donald MacLeod. I'm Quality Improvement Officer with Education and Children's Services. There are national recruitment drives led by Scottish Government and Bord na Gaelic to ensure that there are appropriate levels of staffing in Gaelic medium education. However, it does provide challenges for local authorities to recruit suitably qualified teachers, particularly with the growth of Gaelic medium education in areas such as Glasgow, Edinburgh and Inverness. And that provides challenges to rural areas to recruit to Gaelic medium posts. We have been successful in recruiting to all of our vacant posts, and we have also invested in our own workforce through the Gaelic Immersion for Teachers programme, which has ensured that there's a second teacher now in Bredalbin Academy. The greatest area of concern would be the development of Gaelic medium education subjects in secondary school, and that is an area of development for Bord na Gaelic. However, it is providing challenges in relation to recruitment of suitably qualified staff.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No. Councillor Lyle, can you read the report?
Thank you, Provost. This report sets out the progress Perth Kinross Council has made in implementing the first year of the Gaelic Language Plan 2018-23, covering areas of use, learning and promotion of Gaelic. We have made great progress in adult and community learning, education and early years, as well as celebrating the culture and heritage of Gaelic across Perth and Kinross. We also look to welcoming the Royal National Mod in 2021. Therefore, I move the paper and would ask the Council to note the progress of the Gaelic Language Plan as set out in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Duff to second the report.
Tapig live, froisht, hamig lei holichtje, a cumul suas and paper shaw, in plana Gaelic cohorle fiastas Kinross. Thank you, Provost. I'm delighted to support this paper in the Perth and Kinross Council Gaelic Plan. The paper demonstrates this Council's commitment to Gaelic as a living language and its desire to increase the visibility and use of the language among our communities, with our partners and by our staff. Support for the Gaelic language continues in our primary and secondary schools and throughout our adult education. Both Goodleyburn Primary School in Perth and Bredalbin Academy in Aberfeldy have Gaelic medium units, with increasing numbers of parents choosing the Gaelic medium unit model for their children's education. Gaelic medium nursery provision is also being developed. I'm delighted to see that the number of Gaelic learners and speakers is increasing in virtually all areas of activity within the plan. While there are no longer any native speakers of Perthshire Gaelic still living, Perth and Kinross Council continues to do much in support of the Gaelic language and culture, such as support for the first annual volunteer-run Feish Aha, the Gaelic Tea Festival of traditional music and culture in September. As is already stated, in October 2021, Perth will be the week-long venue for the Royal National Mod, the premier celebration of Gaelic culture, music and tradition, and a major opportunity for this Council and our partners to welcome the thousands of visitors from Gaeldom and to showcase their support for Gaelic. Provost, I would like to thank our Gaelic Development Officer and the officers from the various Council departments listed at paragraph 4.1 for their work in helping to develop and monitor this Gaelic language plan, Gleva is Tapa Live. Well done and thank you. And finish by formally seconding this report.
Falche, Councillor Duff. Falche. Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Provost, and that's a hard act to follow, so well done, Councillor Duff. I commend the report and its contents. However, at the risk of repeating myself, I want to reiterate that, as was acknowledged earlier, Scots is also a living and active language. However, it does concern me that the influence of the Microsoft Word spell checker continues to creep in and somewhat corrupt that. Within the papers for this meeting, the fine Scots word of outwith, which should be spelt without a space, meaning outside of, is spelt with a space in 3 occasions. And I just wanted to put myself on record with that concern that in our own council papers, we aren't using that fine Scots word correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Dugan.
Thank you very much, Provost. There's really genuinely a great deal to be grateful for in this paper. It's very heartening to see the inflation and growth rather in numbers accessing Gaelic medium education, and it remains a great source of pride for myself, and I know my colleague Councillor Rebeck, that we have such fine provision of GME within Goodleyburn in our own ward. I remain grateful, and I know my colleagues do also, for the continued support that GME enjoys within this council, both from our current convener of education, Caroline Shires, and it does Gaelic language no harm at all, as we've just heard, to have advocates like Councillor John Duff literally speaking up for Gaelic language here in Perth Kinross. We should be very grateful for all of these attributes, all contributing towards the sustainability of a very, very important native language, one that we should all be tremendously proud. If I could just make one point though, Provost, I hope I'm right in saying that in actual fact one of your predecessors, former Perth Kinross Councillor Alec Murray, is still with us, and indeed in your ward, Councillor Duff, and I'm pretty sure he is a native Gaelic speaker. But we can maybe discuss that over a cake.
Thank you for those kind words, Councillor Dugan. Councillor Rebeck.
Fiskerma, Provost. Regrettably, that's my Gaelic band, so Councillor Duff has beaten me in that regard. And Councillor Dugan has also stolen a little bit of my thunder, because I was going to big up the Gaelic at Goodleyburn, which is very much alive and kicking. It's great to hear the kids in the playground speaking naturally in Gaelic, and indeed the written words that you see in the school when you go into parent councils, etc., is a joy to see. If I would also like to encourage this council as we develop our cultural offering with the City Hall, etc., that I think Gaelic should be a part, even if it's just a small part, but it should be a part of that offering. And it's just very great to see, as this great nation of ours is emboldened in recent years, so is the speaking of the Gaelic. So thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Rebeck. I understand that Aileen Ogilvie and Fiona are arranging some Gaelic speaking lessons for myself, and I'm sure that you would be very welcome as everybody else, but prior to the mod in 21. Would I be correct, Fiona? Absolutely. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Provost. You can count me as number 4 on that. What I want to bring attention to is the East Perthshire Gaelic group, which have invited me as a member in the past. It's a group that's run by two members in our constituencies. We've got Alex Mulholland, who lives up the Glen, up my Glen in Glenshee, and you have Nicky McCrimmon, who lives in the Carsagowrie, who both run a free adult-based Gaelic learning and orientation to the Gaelic language, which they do out of the Rattray Connect facility in Rattray, obviously. And they do that free of charge, given their own time, with great enthusiasm, and it's a dedication to them that they want to keep this language alive and important for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? We agree the paper? Right, we come to paper 9. I'd like to invite Jim Valentine, Deputy Chief Executive, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost. Councillors, this report relates to a proposal to grant the freedom of the City of Perth to Brigadier Sir Melville Jameson on his retirement as Lord Lieutenant of Perth Kinross. During his tenure, the Lord Lieutenant has fully embraced the role of ambassador for Perth and Kinross, promoting Perth and Kinross at every opportunity, its tourism, its products, its businesses and its charities and more. He has been instrumental in attracting a number of high-profile events and securing royal visits to the area. The economic impact that can result from a royal visit, major civic event or presentation of awards and medals should not be underestimated. His professional reputation, connections with people all around the world and his passion and enthusiasm to promote the area have provided the perfect platform for him to carry out his role as Lord Lieutenant. As a champion of the armed forces and the youth military cadet organisations, he has forged close links with a number of voluntary groups and regimental arts and heritage groups. The Lord Lieutenant was instrumental in developing and supporting the introduction of the City of Perth salute. The now annual event has featured top international Royal Edinburgh military tattoo performers, which have attracted large audiences and generated significant income for city centre businesses. He was a key supporter who championed Perth's city status bid and application process at the highest levels. His and many other efforts were rewarded when Perth was granted city status to mark the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012. The proposals in the report ask the Council to exercise its power under Section 206 of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973 to grant the freedom of the City of Perth to Brigadier Sir Mel Jamieson in recognition of his service to the Perth Kinross area. If you agree, the ceremony would take place at the end of the Perth Salute annual event on 18th of January 2019 to take advantage of the assembled crowds and provide a spectacular background for this historic event.
Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Forbes.
Just want to clarify the date is the 18th of August and not the 18th of January. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely the 18th of August.
Okay. Councillors, it falls to me to formally, and I'm delighted to do so, to move the support as well, as it gives this council an opportunity to recognise the remarkable contribution that Brigadier Sir Melville Jamieson, KCVO, CBE, Lord Lieutenant, has given to Perth and Kinross over the last 14 years. I've worked with him for the last 2 years, and I have to tell you that he has been a tower of strength to me as Provost and a tower of strength to this council. What he does in the background is immeasurable, and I would formally like to hopefully you will all agree with Jim and I that we move this paper so that the council agrees with this proposal. I'd like to hand you over to the Deputy Provost to second the motion.
Thanks, Provost. There will, of course, be an opportunity to formally recognise Mel Jamieson's contribution to Perth and Kinross and indeed to Scotland, and that is a significant contribution. As my colleague Councillor Bob Band will be able to attest, he's been a tremendous support to Provosts and Deputy Provosts and the Council for many, many years. He has a robust, direct, at times blunt, but always helpful manner, and he's always keen to promote and help what we do within the council and what we do within Perth and Kinross. And indeed, it'll be a delight to see his name being added to the very fine list of folk who have been made burgesses and freemen of the city of Perth. It's an honour to be able to second this motion, Provost, and I hope we can be unanimous in our agreement to it. Thank you.
Councillor Lyle.
Thank you, Provost. Just briefly, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to formally thank Brigadier Mel Jamieson for his contributions and support to Perth and Kinross over the past 14 years. I am sure Brigadier Jamieson will deservedly receive many accolades from organisations in Perth and from the people of Perth and Kinross. However, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank him particularly for his contribution towards Perth achieving city status and for initiating the Perth Salute. One only has to look at the names of the previous recipients of this accolade to understand the significance of his achievements. It gives me great pleasure to support this proposal.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Councillor Dugan.
Thank you, Provost. It's a great opportunity to record our substantial thanks, not just as a local authority and as a body of elected members, but as a community in Perth and Kinross, in the city and the whole of the local authority area, for the tremendous work that's been undertaken. I have to say, I haven't had an awful lot personally to do with Brigadier Jameson, but nevertheless, when this became an issue before us, I did seek counsel from those close to me who have, and was left in no doubt by two of your predecessors about the tremendous effort and skillful way in which he went about his business in the interests of Perth and Kinross to deliver, as the Leader of the Council says, really very significant improvements to Perth and Kinross status, and Perth in particular, the status of us regaining city status. So we at this side of the chamber are 100% in accord with this ambition, and look very much forward to it coming into effect. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Councillor Dugan. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Provost. I too am delighted to support this proposal. Being very parochial for a moment, on behalf of councillors for Blairgowrie and the Glens area, we've had the privilege of seeing the Lord Lieutenant, or Mel as we all know him, support our community, his home community of Blairgowrie and Rattray, over all these years. His support in particular for young people, and especially those from the uniformed organisations, has been superb and greatly appreciated by these young people and their families. And I would ask the Council that we give consideration to involving as many of these young people as possible when the celebration occurs. The motto of the Royal Scots Greys, and I'm a geek here because I know it because my dad served with them, the regiment that Mel was first commissioned in before his distinguished career, is second to none. And Mel more than deserves that same reputation as an embodiment of that motto in his role as our Lord Lieutenant. Thank you.
Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Provost. I would echo the remarks that Councillor Shires in particular has just made. I've met Brigadier Jameson twice during royal visits, where he toured around with the Queen and with the Princess Royal at the college, and his commitment to indeed young people and the uniformed services, as Councillor Shires already mentioned, was huge. And I think he has done a great service for Perth and Kinross these past 14 years, and I think it's appropriate that he is recognised for that service by this council, and I'm sure we all thank him for his service.
Thank you, Councillor Dye. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. I'm very pleased to speak on behalf of my Scottish Liberal Democrat colleagues in wholehearted support of granting the freedom of Perth to Brigadier Sir Melville Jameson, Lord Lieutenant of Perth and Kinross. It does seem hard to believe that 14 years have passed since Mel was appointed Lord Lieutenant by the Queen, and as Her Majesty's representative for our area, Mel has demonstrated immense service to Perth and Kinross, enhancing the reputation of our city and recognition of Perth once again as a city. With Mel as Lord Lieutenant, we've been highly favoured by visits from members of the royal family to Perth and Kinross, and have benefited greatly by his escorting of royal visitors during their visits. In my time as a councillor over the course of Mel's lieutenantship, Perth has been honoured by official visits from the Queen and Prince Philip, Prince Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, Prince William and the Countess of Strathearn. Those visits have enhanced our collective sense of civic pride and have brought spectacle and status which has put Perth firmly on the map and provided tangible recognition of our area and its contribution to our armed forces, recognition of our citizens and voluntary sector's contribution to society, and recognition of our cultural life and our heritage. Mel has replicated and reinforced all of these through his participation in and contribution to civic life in Perth and Kinross. Through bringing the Perth Salute to our calendar of events, Mel has brought international colour, musicality and bands of the highest military standard beyond the city boundaries of Edinburgh and onto our streets and inches for the people of Perth and Kinross and visitors to our area to enjoy. Provost, I'm looking forward to the Freedom of the City of Perth ceremony in August, which fittingly and deservedly will take place at the conclusion of the City of Perth salute in recognition of Mel Jamieson's outstanding contribution. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any further contributions, comments? We agree? Thank you very much. Item 10, appointment to working group. Can we agree the change? Oh, I'll hand you over to Scott Hendy to discuss this one.
Provost, just to confirm, in addition to the change to the Modernising Governance Member Officer Working Group on the agenda, there's been a request for Council to approve that in relation to the Scotland Excel Joint Committee, that Councillor Jarvis replace Councillor Stewart as the main member, with Councillor Illingworth replacing Councillor Purvis as the substitute member.
Thank you, Scott. Item 11, amendment to the Scheme of Administration. Can we agree the amendments to the Scheme of Administration as set out in the agenda? Councillor McCall.
Thanks, Provost. It's just really a point of clarification rather than a question. I notice in item 25 there's a reference to the Chief Officer of Social Work, but in item 26 it's the Chief Social Work Officer. And I'm just wondering if they're two different roles or if it's just a different way of describing the same thing.
It's okay.
It's certainly one way to silence the Chief Exec. They are actually the same thing, Councillor McCall.
Okay, can we agree? Thank you very much, and thank you. It's been a long day. Thank you for your cooperation.